Chapter 805. This round of reorganization was expected to last until the middle of March. Once the conference was over, the divine generals would return to their barracks and cooperate with the general administration of military affairs in reorganizing the army while they rested and trained in preparation for the next major battle. The matter of constructing a fortress on the northern border also needed to be set up immediately and could not be delayed. That was especially true for Bai Qi. It was not easy at all. The Dragon Stallion army not only had to clean up the remaining poison in the 3 counties of Yunnan, but they also had to keep an eye on Dali Commandery. More importantly, the Dragon Stallion army's headquarters had to be moved to Yunnan province, and a new headquarters and barracks had to be built outside of Lingxi City. The combat division also had to work with the Dragon Stallion army to prepare rations and fodder. The Dragon Stallion army had suffered heavy losses in the Battle of Yunnan, and all its divisions had suffered casualties. The newly recruited soldiers also had to work with each other through training to help them integrate into the system of Shanghai City. In short, there were many complicated matters to attend to, and it was not as if they could relax just because there was no war. Fortunately, Bai Qi had been a soldier for a long time, so he was very skilled at handling military affairs. He would not be able to adapt to being away from the barracks for a long time. It was not just Bai Qi. The 3 newly appointed governors of the 3 counties of Yunnan were not having an easy time either. In order to organize their subordinates as quickly as possible, they had even given up on the New Year's holiday. It was reported that they were even working overtime on the most important New Year's Eve. There was no need to mention Chao Can. The Dongchuan commandery he had inherited was a complete mess. Not only did he have to heal the wounds of the common people, but he also had to deal with the debt demands of the aristocrats and merchants. Zhu Jin's request for compensation from Hua Tsubing in Yongren City was not an isolated case. Every county that had been looted by the Swordsman City Army would run to the newly established Yamen to demand an explanation. As the governor of a county, how could Chao Can have peace? Especially after Swordsman City compensated Shanghai City with 800,000 gold coins, the merchants became even fiercer in their debt demands. These merchants had sharp noses, and nothing could escape their notice. Chao Can could only brace himself and report to the Protectorate Office for a decision from the General Administration of Finance. Strangely enough, Fan Li immediately replied that the General Administration of Finance would take out 200,000 gold coins from the 800,000 to compensate the aristocrats and merchants who had been looted by the Dongchuan commandery. Not only that, but the Bank of the Four Seas would also open branches in Dongchuan Prefecture within a month. The Bank of the Four Seas would give preferential loans to the merchants who were robbed. Although the funds allocated by the General Administration of Finance was only half of the looted amount, the merchants were satisfied with the loan support. They were even overjoyed. Although they were making a ruckus, they didn't really expect to get any compensation. As the saying goes, every injustice has its perpetrator, every debt has its debtor. No matter how hard they tried to collect the debt, they would not be able to trace it to the newly established Yamen. The merchants were doing this because they wanted to gain sympathy in front of the new superior, so that their future business would more or less be taken care of by the government and not be too exploited. It could only be said that these merchants did not understand Shanghai City at all. In the entire wilderness, other than Lord Chuanshan's Danyang City, Shanghai City had the most complete commercial system. The status of the merchants was also rather high, and they would not receive any unfair treatment. It was even more impossible for the government to exploit merchants. On the contrary, since the beginning of the territory's construction, Ouyang Shua, the Lord, had been supporting the territory's business to flourish, and he worked hard to create a relaxed business atmosphere. As long as the merchants paid their taxes on time, and at the same time, they would have no more worries. Shanghai City did this, but the other territories in the wilderness were not the same. They were either influenced by the aristocrats and bureaucrats who looked down on the merchants, or they were pretending to be ignorant, and more or less exploited the merchants. "There's nothing we can do, we're poor." The merchants did not dare to resist, and the lords naturally felt more at ease when they exploited them. It was reported that some territories' exploitation of the merchants had reached an appalling level, and they were basically treating the merchants as money bags. When they ran out of money or wanted to build an army, they would be exploited out of habit. The previous territories of Dongchuan Commandery were mostly like this. Because of this, even Zhu Jin, an outsider from Dali Royal City, did not dare to pester Hua Tsubing a second time after he was rejected by him in Yanran City. In comparison, the General Administration of Finance's actions this time were too benevolent, so benevolent that the merchants did not dare to believe it, and felt like they were in a dream. After confirming it, they were naturally ecstatic. The merchants' approval of the new government shot up like a rocket. Ouyang Shua was very much in agreement with Fan Li's actions. Compared to Chao Can, the prefectural governor, Fan Li was clearly more far-sighted, and he looked at the problem more thoroughly. First, should they pay compensation? Yes. When the Imperial Guards attacked Yanran City for the first time, Dongchuan Commandery had already belonged to Shanghai City. The series of events that happened afterwards only served to prove one thing. Ouyang Shua failed to protect the people under his rule. Let's say that your people were robbed by the enemy, and now you've helped them seek justice, and even received double the compensation. Don't tell me you're going to take all the compensation for yourself? Impossible. Therefore, there was nothing wrong with Fan Li's actions. What was even more brilliant was that Fan Li only paid half of the compensation, and used preferential loans as a disguised form of compensation. Through this method, Fan Li was also secretly warning the merchants of Dongchuan Commandery, "Be content, don't push your luck." Merchants had always been a group of greedy fellows, born to pursue profit. Since they were greedy, they did not know what satisfaction was. Once Shanghai City lowered its stance too much, these fellows would take advantage of it. In this way, Chao Can, the prefectural governor of Dongchuan Commandery, would not have an easy time in the future. Fan Li only paid half of the compensation. Although it seemed stingy, it was actually brilliant. Coupled with the preferential loans promised by the Bank of the Four Seas, it was enough to restore the destroyed businesses of Dongchuan Commandery to prosperity in a short period of time. From this small matter, one could see the political wisdom of the Director of Finance. How could a saint-level historical figure be ordinary? If one felt that they did not perform well, that was only because they had not truly acknowledged them. And the current Fan Li had undoubtedly integrated into the system of Shanghai City. Besides the prefectural governor of Dongchuan Commandery, the other two governors did not have it easy either. The prefectural governor of Mengding, Tian Wenjing, was even more miserable. The Mengding Commandery that he had taken over was the one that had been most thoroughly attacked by the Dragon Stallion army. At least 10% of the youths in the commandery had died at the hands of the Dragon Stallion army. This was a blood feud. Even now, the officials of the various prefectures and counties would occasionally be attacked by the locals on their way to their posts. For this reason, the Zhang Liao Corps stationed in Tingyue Commandery had no choice but to send a division to guard these officials. The public security within the commandery was simply terrible. If the people's hearts were not stable, the blood feud would not be resolved. Even the festive atmosphere of the Spring Festival had been washed away. Placed in front of Tian Wenjing was a gargantuan problem. The cold-faced governor was calm and unhurried. The first thing he did after taking office was to use the special funds Ouyang Shua had allocated to pay a generous pension to the families of the deceased. In addition, Tian Wenjing ordered all the officials of the various prefectures and counties to move out with sincerity and Spring Festival gifts to express their apologies and condolences to the families of the deceased. The Spring Festival gifts were not fake. They were all practical items such as rice, flour, oil, and cloth. This was in line with Tian Wenjing's practical style. With this series of actions, he finally managed to quell the resentment of the people. After the Spring Festival, during the Qingming Festival, Tian Wenjing prepared to hold large-scale memorial ceremonies in the various prefectures and counties in order to further dispel the resentment of the people and win over the hearts of the people. The dead were the most important, and nothing could be done. Tian Wenjing was keenly aware that if the hearts of the people did not return, it would be difficult to carry out any government orders. The Spring Festival holiday had just passed, and Tian Wenjing was busy again. He went to various prefectures and counties to investigate the local customs. He encouraged the farmers to open up terraced fields outside the city and promoted the welfare policy of mulberry planting and silkworm rearing. Tian Wenjing also encouraged the herbalists to take advantage of the superior forest environment of Mengding County to introduce the planting techniques of medicinal herbs, vigorously develop the medicinal herb industry, and embark on the road to riches. Every time he went to a place, Tian Wenjing was able to put forward reasonable suggestions to get rich according to the local conditions. This time, it completely revealed the solid foundation of the cold-faced county chief. Historically, Tian Wenjing was a very practical official. He was very familiar with the lives of the commoners and was proficient in various industries. It was naturally easy for him to guide them. Previously, there was compensation and condolences to ease the trauma of losing their loved ones. Now, they saw the hope of getting rich. The commoners of Mengding County gradually changed their minds and gradually acknowledged the governor. As such, Tian Wenjing initially stabilized the situation of Mengding County that was on the verge of collapse. It was considered a great achievement. Ouyang Shua even specially issued an imperial edict to reward this meritorious official. The title of a model governor was not just for show. Tian Wenjing's methods seemed ordinary, but they required a solid foundation. It was truly an impressive way of governing. Compared to Tian Wenjing, the governor of Tingyue County, Zhou Haichen, who also served in the south, was much more relaxed. Firstly, Tingyue County had surrendered in the later stages and was not damaged by the war. The overall order in the county was still considered stable. Secondly, with Zhang Liao's army holding the fort, the small fry would not be able to cause much trouble. The only thing that Zhou Haichen needed to worry about was the settlement of the mountain barbarians. When Ouyang Shua contacted the mountain barbarians in the mountains of Yunnan and asked them to go down the mountain to assist Shanghai City in the battle, he had made a promise. Now that the war was over, Tingyue County naturally had to fulfill the promise. Zhou Haichen would follow the model of Wuzhou County and bring the mountain barbarian tribes living deep in the mountains to live at the foot of the mountain. He would build hundreds of mountain barbarian autonomous towns. This was a considerable expenditure. In addition, he had to organize people to train the mountain barbarians in skills and help them quickly change from a hunting civilization to a farming civilization. The mountain barbarians had seen the rich life of the mountain barbarians in Wuzhou County. They would not be as hesitant as the mountain barbarians in Lianzhou Basin at the beginning. They could not wait to go down the mountain as soon as possible. Although the various matters were not difficult, they were complicated. For Zhou Haichen, the new governor, it could be considered a good experience. Chapter 806. February 6th, January 8th, Shanghai City. For the people in the city, the New Year would only be celebrated after the Lantern Festival. Therefore, even though the government was already at work, the city was still brimming with a festive atmosphere and was extremely lively. Other than Bai Qi and the other army commanders, there were also some generals who returned to Shanghai City during the Spring Festival to visit their families. For example, Southern Border Navy Commander Zhou Yu. After the end of the Battle of Qi Bai, the famous beauty of the Three Kingdoms, Little Qiao, accompanied Zhou Yu and appeared in Shanghai City. They settled down in a house and were in love with each other. Unfortunately, Zhou Yu only stayed in Shanghai City for 2 months before he rushed to the North Sea Bay Fleet to take up his post. Although the two places were only separated by a valley, there was still a difference between the two armies. Zhou Yu had just been appointed and had yet to make any contributions. No matter how much he missed his lovely wife, he could not return to Shanghai City on his own. This wait lasted until the Spring Festival holiday. Zhou Yu had already returned to North Sea City on the 5th day of the first lunar month. Who would have thought that on the 7th day of the first month, the General Administration of Military Affairs would pass on the reorganization plan of the army to the commanders of the army. The North Sea Bay Fleet was renamed as the Southern Border Fleet, and they would choose a day to defend Oceanwood City. According to the plan, the Southern Border Fleet would not be able to return to Shanghai City for a very long time. Upon seeing this, Zhou Yu returned to Shanghai City on the same day. Firstly, he wanted to take the opportunity to see the Navy Governor Zheng, he who had not yet left, and let him know beforehand. Secondly, he wanted to take the opportunity to bid farewell to his lovely wife. In history, Zhou Yu was known as the handsome Zhou Lang. He was a romantic and elegant man, so it was only natural that he doted on his beautiful wife. Seeing that they were going to be separated for a long time, Xiao Qiao immediately cried until her eyes turned red. Right at this moment, a soldier came to report, "His Majesty summons you." Xiao Qiao was startled. Her eyes shone with hope as she said, "Husband, could it be that Jun Shang has other plans for you?" She was overwhelmed by the feelings of parting, and was no longer the usual shrewd Xiao Qiao. Zhou Yu naturally understood his lovely wife. He clapped his hands and smiled warmly. "Madam, I'll be back soon." When he arrived at the Protectorate Manor, he saw Su Chu standing guard outside, his face expressionless and his eyes wide open. The two of them used to be enemies, but now they were both officials of the same palace. It was really hard to predict. Zhou Yu did not dare to slight Su Chu. Not to mention the fact that Su Chu was a hero of the Three Kingdoms. Even as an opponent, Zhou Yu admired his bravery. Even with Su Chu's current status as the captain of the guards and the divine marshal general, no one dared to disrespect him. Zhou Yu smiled and cupped his fists. "General Su Chu, is his lordship here? I have come under orders to see you. Please inform them." Su Chu grinned and retreated to the side, saying, "General, please come in. His Majesty is waiting in the study." Zhou Yu once again cupped his fists and stepped in. His movements were elegant, and he was truly a scholarly general with an elegant demeanor. A rough man like Su Chu naturally felt uncomfortable when he saw this. He wanted to laugh, but his laughter was uglier than crying. Entering the study, Zhou Yu saw that Jun Shang was bent over the table reading memorials. Not daring to disturb him, he quietly stood in a corner. Raising his eyes to look, he saw that there was a small table placed below Jun Shang's table, and a young girl dressed in green was arranging the memorials to the throne. Seeing her elegant appearance, Zhou Yu could not help but sigh in admiration. Thinking that this was Jun Shang's study, this girl must be someone close to Jun Shang. Zhou Yu immediately withdrew his gaze, not daring to profane her, and quietly stood there with rapt attention. Ouyang Shua had long sensed Zhou Yu's arrival, but he was in the middle of reading a memorial. He wanted to finish it in one go, so he did not open his mouth to greet him. With a few brushes, he finished reading. Having entered the game for 3 years, he had read countless memorials. Not to mention anything else, Ouyang Shua felt that his calligraphy was getting better and better, and there was a trace of a unique charm to it. He had really put in a lot of effort. Ouyang Shua raised his head and said with a smile, "Gong Jin is here? Come, have a seat." Zhou Yu cupped his fists and solemnly saluted. "This general has been summoned to greet His Majesty." Saying this, he sat down on the chair that Su Chu had brought over, but he did not dare to sit completely, only putting up half of it to show his respect to Jun Shang. At this time, Cyan Close also came back to her senses and curiously looked at Zhou Yu. In the eyes of the players, this beautiful Zhou Lang was also a super idol, a complete mystery to tens of thousands of people. Ouyang Shua did not go straight to the point, but took the opportunity to chat with Zhou Yu about the southern frontier fleet, telling him some of his expectations and plans for the southern frontier fleet. Since receiving the army reorganization plan, Zhou Yu had begun to ponder how to realize the strategic intentions of the Conference of Commanders and realize the new position of the southern frontier fleet. As the two chatted, the more they talked, the more congenial they became, and many of their ideas coincided with each other. Zhou Yu was indeed Zhou Yu. He had an extremely unique understanding of the construction of the Navy, especially the inland Navy. Some of his ideas made Ouyang Shuo, a pioneer, involuntarily slap the table in praise. Good, good. Ouyang Shuo's smile deepened, his mood rather carefree. He said with a smile, "With you, Gongjin, commanding the southern frontier fleet, I can rest assured." Zhou Yu cupped his fists, but did not exchange pleasantries. Ouyang Shuo's tone changed, and he finally returned to the original purpose of summoning Zhou Yu. He asked, "I ask you, after coming to the wilderness, do you still have letters with Pang Tong?" Zhou Yu was startled, somewhat unsure of what Jun Shang meant. He could only answer truthfully, "Indeed, we occasionally communicate." After saying this, Zhou Yu felt somewhat anxious and fearful. Pang Tong was now an important minister of the Shu Han dynasty. His status was almost equal to Zhuge Liang, the prime minister. Shanghai City and the Shu Han dynasty were mortal enemies. Could it be that Jun Shang was suspicious of him? This crime of colluding with the enemy was a serious crime. Thinking back to the contents of the letters, Zhou Yu felt slightly at ease. There was nothing wrong with the contents of the letters. Now it all depended on the breadth of mind of this Jun Shang in front of him. If it was a narrow-minded person, even if there was no evidence of collusion, there would still be a rift in his heart. Thus, he would alienate him and not put him in an important position. Thinking of what Madame had said before she left, Zhou Yu actually felt a trace of bitterness in his heart. It wouldn't be a prophecy, would it? From start to finish, in less than a minute, Zhou Yu's heart had already turned 100 and 1,000 times. Zhou Yu was thinking too much. No matter how paranoid Ouyang Shuo was, he would not think that Zhou Yu would seek refuge with the Shu Han dynasty. Between the two, they were mortal enemies. It was just that not everyone could maintain a calm heart when things came to a head. This was especially so for a newcomer like Zhou Yu, who had not made any contributions and had not truly integrated into Shanghai City. There was also a gap between him and Ouyang Shuo, the ruler. This was not surprising. Ouyang Shuo was busy with government affairs. After the Battle of Red Cliffs, he had been busy conquering the two major provinces of Lingnan and Yunnan. He had not had the chance to communicate with Zhou Yu and the other generals of the three countries. This was especially so for the generals of the Dong Yu Wu Navy. The process of subduing them was not glorious, and there was probably still a trace of resentment in their hearts. The relationship between the ruler and his subjects was still rather distant. Zhou Yu could not understand Ouyang Shuo's character, but he could understand. Ouyang Shuo smiled and said, "There is no need to worry. What I mean is it possible to invite Mr. Pang Tong to Shanghai City to become an official? If Mr. Pang Tong is willing to come, I will definitely give him a high position. If the players wanted to defeat the royal city, they could not do it in one go. Instead, they had to do it slowly. Dali Royal City did not have a dynasty yet, so Ouyang Shuo had no way to start. He could only set his sights on the Shu Han dynasty. And the first step was to dig out the Shu Han dynasty's foundation. The retreat of the 5 horses of Western Liang from Chengdu was the first example. Now, Ouyang Shuo had set his sights on Pang Tong. Pang Tong's courtesy name was Xiuan, and his nickname was Young Phoenix. He was as famous as the crouching dragon Zhuge Liang, and was highly regarded and trusted by Liu Bei. He was one of the 2 most important military advisors under Liu Bei. If he could dig out Pang Tong, he would be able to cut off one of Liu Bei's arms. In history, Pang Tong was the main reason why Liu Bei was able to seize Yi province. Unfortunately, the heavens were jealous of his talent. When Liu Bei besieged Luo County, Pang Tong led his troops to attack the city. Unfortunately, he was hit by a stray arrow and died at the age of 36. He was conferred the title of Marquis Jing. Later on, the place where Pang Tong was buried was named Luofeng Hill. In the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, it was said that Pang Tong was ambushed at Luofeng Hill and was fated to be buried there. However, it was intentionally belittling Pang Tong to further highlight Zhuge Liang's status and talent. Of course, Ouyang Shua's request for Zhou Yu to instigate Pang Tong was not without reason. Firstly, according to the Shanhai Guards, Pang Tong did not have a good time in the Shu Han dynasty. Although Pang Tong was deeply trusted by Liu Bei, he was always suppressed by Zhuge Liang. He had talent but was unable to put it to good use. It was not that Pang Tong was not as talented as Zhuge Liang. It was just that more than 80% of the old officials of Shu Han respected Zhuge Liang. They could only blame Pang Tong for dying too early and Zhuge Liang for living too long. Of the important officials of Shu Han who appeared in the wilderness, less than half were personally trained by Zhuge Liang after Liu Bei's death. Some of the officials only had eyes for the prime minister and not the emperor. Not to mention Pang Tong, even Liu Bei, the emperor of Shu Han, felt a little uncomfortable at times. When Zhuge Liang assisted the late ruler Liu Chan, he was used to being the sole ruler. It was inevitable that he was a little arrogant and did not care about Liu Bei's face. The relationship between the emperor and his officials was actually quite delicate. It was said that Liu Bei had once wanted to use Pang Tong to restrain Zhuge Liang and balance his power. Unfortunately, he had little success. This was one of the reasons. More importantly, Zhou Yu and Pang Tong were old friends and they had a good relationship. In real history, after the Battle of Red Cliffs, Sun Quan made Zhou Yu a deputy general and the governor of Southern County. As for Pang Tong, he was conferred the title of Meritorious Officer of Southern County. What was a meritorious officer? According to the Han system, the meritorious officer of a county, other than human affairs, could often be involved in the county's affairs. In other words, Pang Tong, the meritorious officer, was actually the most important administrative assistant of Zhou Yu, the governor. His status was extraordinary. The two of them were directly superior and subordinate. Pang Tong served Zhou Yu for close to 2 years until Zhou Yu's death. There was no historical evidence that the two of them were not on good terms. Pang Tong also did not turn to anyone before Zhou Yu's death. The biography of Pang Tong in the Three Kingdoms even recorded that after Zhou Yu's death, Pang Tong sent his funeral to Wu. The people of Wu had heard of his name. In ancient times, sending someone's funeral was a grand ceremony. For Pang Tong to send someone a funeral, it was even more significant. Only those who respected or were extremely close to the deceased had the right to do it. In other words, only those who were extremely close to the deceased could do it even if they wanted to. Zhou Yu had previously mentioned that the two of them were still exchanging letters in the wilderness. This undoubtedly proved this point. Chapter 807. Since Pang Tong had a close relationship with Zhou Yu, how did Pang Tong end up joining Liu Bei after Zhou Yu's death? Liu Bei occupied Jingzhou and became the magistrate of Jingzhou. Pang Tong became the magistrate of Luoyang County. Unfortunately, Pang Tong was once removed from office because he did not pay attention to county affairs. At that moment, Lu Su of Eastern Wu wrote a letter to Liu Bei, telling him that Pang Tong was not a talented person. The so-called talent of 100 li referred to those who were only qualified to govern 100 li. Lu Su's meaning was very clear. It was a waste of talent to let Pang Tong be the county magistrate. He was a great talent that needed to be put to good use. During this period of time, Zhuge Liang also mentioned Pang Tong to Liu Bei. Thereupon, Liu Bei summoned Pang Tong. After a round of discussion, Liu Bei regarded Pang Tong highly and appointed him as the administrator of central affairs. Historically, It had always been a mystery whether Zhou Yu and Lu Su had recommended Pang Tong to Sun Quan. Perhaps he did, but Sun Quan rejected him. Perhaps the Jiangdong group at that time did not lack talents like Pang Tong. As for the romance of the heavens, Shi Su also recommended Tong, but because Tong's appearance was ugly and inferior to Sun Quan, he was not recommended. This should be a fabrication. The truth had already become a mystery. No matter what, with the relationship between Zhou Yu and Pang Tong, coupled with Pang Tong's lack of success in Shuhan, Ouyang Shuo had a reason to sow discord and poach a talent like Pang Tong. At the very least, he wanted Liu Bei to suspect Pang Tong and not put him in an important position. Of course, this was a last resort, and Ouyang Shuo wouldn't use it unless he had no other choice. When Zhou Yu heard this, he realized that the Lord was referring to this matter. His heart, which had been hanging in the air, finally relaxed. He smiled and said, "Since the Lord has entrusted this task to me, I will do my best to fulfill it." Ouyang Shuo nodded and said, "Gongjin, you don't need to be impatient. You need to plan slowly." "I understand." Zhou Yu nodded. From Pang Tong's letter, Zhou Yu could vaguely sense Pang Tong's distress, which was why he appeared so confident. Ouyang Shuo smiled and said, "General is about to go on a long journey, I won't keep you for long." Zhou Yu, on the other hand, was startled. He had long heard that Jun Shang had a mysterious intelligence agency that was in charge of monitoring the officials. He didn't expect that his conversation with his wife wouldn't escape the eyes of this organization. Fortunately, he didn't have any ulterior motives when interacting with Pang Tong. Otherwise, he would have been beheaded by now. Zhou Yu's expression was calm and unruffled. He stood up, saluted, and took his leave. The seed had been planted, but whether it would blossom and bear fruit was still a matter of time. After sending Zhou Yu off, Ouyang Shuo still had to meet one more person, and that was Lei Fan. A few days ago, the assessment team led by Zhang Tingyu had returned to Shanghai City and submitted a detailed assessment report. In the end, not only did Xiao He feel ashamed, but even Ouyang Shuo was shocked. According to Zhang Tingyu's evaluation, Lei Fan and his Duanren manor were not simple. First, Duanren Manor. Other than the favored god's manor, Duanren Manor was the last to be established in Zhili County. However, Duanren Manor's revenue was the highest in the county, second only to Mulan Manor. Especially after the Qiushui River was widened, the number of merchant ships entering Shanghai City through the Pearl River system increased. Duanren Manor seized the opportunity to build a pier on the East Law Lake for the merchant ships to stop at, becoming a node on the trade route. Coupled with the preferential policies introduced by Duanren Manor, some merchant ships even gave up on entering Shanghai City and directly started doing business at Duanren Manor, greatly promoting the development of Duanren Manor's trade. Mulan Manor's tariff advantage was weakening, and Duanren Manor was overtaking it. Apart from that, Duanren Manor's aquaculture, medicine, and silkworm industries were all flourishing. With the help of the gold mine, the economy was strong. The difficult part was that Duanren Manor's governance was clean and honest. Although Lei Fan was born in the mountain barbarians, he was not a boorish person and adapted well to the rules of officialdom. What was more difficult was that he retained the tenacity and boldness unique to the mountain barbarians, which allowed Lei Fan to overcome all obstacles. This kind of boldness and action was very rare to see in an official who had graduated from a specialized class. This also formed Lei Fan's unique charisma. For example, building a pier on the East Law Lake was clearly a way to steal Shanghai City's business. Lei Fan also did what Tianfeng Manor did not dare to do, which was also convenient for them. Facts proved that this method not only did not harm Shanghai City's core interests, but it also successfully created a secondary market outside of the primary market, diverting the non-core functions of Shanghai City, achieving a win-win situation. Seeing this, Tianfeng Manor followed suit at West Law Lake, but they were already a step too late. Similar incidents were too numerous to mention. Not only that, Lei Fan did not have any racial prejudice. He would not be biased towards the mountain barbarians just because he was born in the mountain barbarians, and he handled matters fairly. When the territory code was implemented, Lei Fan did not hesitate to punish the mountain barbarians for their crimes. Even at that time, Lei Fan did not bring out the mountain barbarian tribe's rules to replace the territory code to punish his clansmen. It was clear that he had a deep understanding of the territory code. Because he handled matters fairly, Lei Fan was deeply loved and respected by the Han people and mountain barbarians. A mountain barbarian was supported by the Han people. Just this alone was a very impressive achievement. Even Zhang Tingyu admitted it. The prejudice against the mountain barbarians can end now, starting from Lei Fan. Ouyang Shua's policy of racial integration seemed to have blossomed and borne fruit. Xiao He also admitted his mistake and was willing to forfeit his salary for half a year. In this way, the last obstacle to Lei Fan's promotion was removed. Just yesterday, the Protectorate of the Southern Border officially announced Lei Fan's appointment. Lei Fan would be promoted to Izhou County Chief immediately. Once the news came out, it caused a huge wave in the territory. Along with the appointment certificate was the evaluation report of Lei Fan from the Office of Personnel. It was said that Xiao He had resisted the pressure and requested to be announced. In this way, the mountain barbarians could be considered to have cleared the name of the mountain barbarians. Whether it was the mountain barbarians of Zhili County, the mountain barbarians of Wuzhou County, or even the mountain barbarians of Tingyue County, this appointment certificate had an extraordinary meaning. It symbolized that the mountain barbarians were completing their transformation, saying goodbye to boorishness and ignorance. Before taking office, Lei Fan specially made a trip to Shanghai City. Lei Fan was not stupid. By now, he had already heard about the twists and turns of this appointment. Lei Fan is naturally grateful to Jun Shang for supporting him. Before officially taking office, Lei Fan also wanted to listen to the Lord's advice. When Ouyang Shua saw Lei Fan, the first thing he said was, "Lord Zhao's decision to postpone your appointment is due to official business, not personal feelings. You have to understand this." "I understand." Lei Fan's expression was complicated. How could he not know the prejudice the outside world had against the mountain barbarians? After seeing the vastness of the world, he realized his own ignorance and inexperience. For the mountain barbarians who were slowly integrating into the agricultural system, there was no doubt that they cherished the opportunity before them. The mountain barbarian warriors were willing to accept the most rigorous training, and the mountain barbarians diligently learned all kinds of skills every day. As for officials like Lei Fan, they were treading on thin ice. Every member of the mountain barbarian tribe was working hard for this transformation, doing their best in their respective field. Everything was just to change. To no longer be discriminated against, to no longer be inferior. This was not a matter for one person, but for the entire tribe to forge ahead. Fortunately, hard work paid off, and they finally saw the dawn of the mountain barbarian tribe's rise. Lei Fan's ascension was a clear signal. The greatest contributor was none other than the Lord in front of Lei Fan. It was the Lord who took the initiative to make contact with the mountain barbarian tribe and led the Blackbird tribe down the mountain, thus opening the path to glory for the mountain barbarian tribe. It was the Lord who formulated the mountain barbarian policy, placing the mountain barbarian warriors in important positions and relying on them as the most reliable guards. When Ouyang Shua decided to station the Monolith Army in King City, it was not that no one objected. Ouyang Shua, on the other hand, was arbitrary. No one knew better than Ouyang Shua that the mountain barbarian tribe's loyalty to him stemmed from their bloodline. If there was a troop that was least likely to betray him, it would definitely be the Monolith Army. Because Ouyang Shua was their supreme king, and the noblest blood of the ancient mountain barbarians flowed in his body. As such, what reason did Ouyang Shua have not to station the Monolith Army in King City? Ouyang Shua said, "The high mountain tribe of Ijo County is also a valiant and respectable tribe. After you take up your post, you must make more contact with them and dispel their apprehensions." The high mountain tribe mainly lived in the central mountains of Ijo County, the eastern Zongu Plains, and Orchid Island. In the game, the high mountain tribe, like the Li tribe and the mountain barbarians, mainly relied on fishing and hunting, and had yet to enter an agricultural civilization. Every mountain in Ijo County had a specific master, and it was their hunting ground. It was sacred and inviolable. The high mountain tribe were very ferocious, and because of hunting territories, different tribes would often have disputes, and killings would occur from time to time. They even had the custom of headhunting, and hunting the enemy's head as a sign of their coming-of-age ceremony. The high mountain tribe was respectable because they were fearless and unafraid of sacrificing themselves when fighting against foreign invaders. Even though they knew that it was like throwing an egg against a rock, they still displayed the high mountain tribe's heroic spirit, abandoning their bodies to retain their fighting spirit. The Sedek tribe in the epic movie Sedek Balai was a branch of the high mountain tribe. The movie was about the famous Fog Society uprising, in which the high mountain tribe's heroic figure, Mona Rudeo, led less than 1,000 tribesmen to fight against the Japanese invaders. The total population of the Sedek tribe in Fog Society was less than 2,100, and in this uprising, more than 900 people died in battle or committed suicide. In order not to be a burden to the men and to save rations, the women of the tribe generously went to their deaths, hanging themselves. The 3,000 Japanese soldiers even used poison gas bombs, but more than half of them were still killed or injured. Therefore, although the uprising failed, the Sedek people held on to the spirit of the tribe. The film made people's blood boil as it vividly showed and presented the wild battle between men. Real men. Faced with such a tribe, Ouyang Shua hoped that it could be like the mountain barbarians and the Li tribe, gradually integrating into the system of Shanghai City and becoming a part of the big family. One day in the future, Shanghai City might be able to go to Ijo County to recruit the strongest high mountain tribe warriors, gallop on the battlefield, and show the heroic spirit of hot-blooded men. Just thinking about it was enough to make one's heart flutter. Mobile users, please browse and read for a better reading experience. Chapter 808. Lei Fan's experience in managing Duanren Manor made him a suitable candidate to govern Ijo County. There were many similarities between the mountain barbarian tribe and the high mountain tribe. Lei Fan's appearance would also gain the high mountain tribe's approval. The high mountain race was an exceptionally staunch race, and using force would not do. Ouyang Shua wasn't in a hurry and was extremely patient. The two of them chatted until noon before Lei Fan took his leave. Lei Fan would be teleported to Shanghai City, and then escorted by warships to Ijo County to take up his post. Along with Lei Fan were 50 capable officials selected by the General Administration of Administration. On the 8th day of the 2nd month, the 10th day of the 1st month, in the back garden of the Southern Border Protectorate. On this day, Ouyang Shua was accompanying Binger to play with the lucky beast, Kiaichi, in the back garden. Binger was feeding Chi the fresh bamboo that she had found with great difficulty. Chi-One was still as dumb as ever. He didn't have the intuition of a lucky beast at all. A pair of short legs tried to hook onto Bing-Er's calves, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't. He could only curl up into a ball and hug a bamboo stick, crunching happily. As he ate, he did not forget to squeeze under Binger's feet, causing Binger to laugh incessantly. On the 1st day of the 1st month, Chi-Yi's auspicious sign of sweeping golden dragon really surprised Ouyang Shua. He thought that he would have to wait for the little fellow to grow up before he could trigger the auspicious sign. It seemed like whether or not the auspicious sign would be triggered depended entirely on the little fellow's mood. Ouyang Shua planned to send Chi-Yi to the Spirit Beast Pavilion in Cliff Mountain City to cultivate after the Lantern Festival. Although the little guy was a lucky beast, it was also a quasi-divine beast. Perhaps after cultivating for a while, he might even learn some new skills. As Bing fed the bamboo, she did not stop talking. She asked, "Big brother, are you going to be the emperor?" "Yes." Ouyang Shua didn't hide anything and said with a smile, "You are also going to be a princess." But Bing is not happy. The little girl frowned, which was rare for her. She put down the bamboo in her hand and scattered it on the ground. When Chi saw this, he finally let go of Bing-er's leg. Like a rabbit, he jumped up and down, picking up the scattered bamboo and hugging it in his arms like a treasure. At the last moment, Chi wanted to run back to his young master with the bamboo. Unfortunately, her legs were short, and her arms were not long either. How could her small body carry so many bamboos? As he jogged, the bamboo kept falling. By the time he returned to Bing-er's side, the only thing left in his arms was the bamboo he was chewing on. Chi-Wan scratched his head with his short hand. His eyes, which had dark circles around them, were filled with confusion. Where did the bamboo go? When he turned around, he saw the bamboo that had fallen to the ground. Chi-Wan was really patient. He ran out again and began to collect bamboo. From the looks of it, the little guy was treating this as a fun game. It's really square. Fortunately, no one noticed that Ouyang Shua was caught unprepared by Bing-er's reaction. Unhappy? Can you tell me why? Ouyang Shua asked. Bing-er said matter-of-factly, "Big brother, think about it. The emperors on TV are all so fierce. Even princes and princesses had to bow to him, not daring to smile. Brother, now that you've become the emperor, will you become very fierce?" Ouyang Shua was startled. He rubbed Bing-er's hair and said with a smile, "Even if I become the emperor, I will still be your brother. He's still the same person. How could he change?" "You messed up my hair." Bing-er was very concerned about her image now. She dressed herself beautifully every day. However, she was not satisfied with her brother's answer. She pouted and said, "Big brother, you're brushing me off." The little girl was not easy to fool now. She was very quick-witted. Ouyang Shua smiled and avoided answering. However, he sighed in his heart. "Because I also don't know if I will change." The emperors of the past would solemnly swear before they sat on the throne. However, if they really sat on it, they would not be able to control themselves. Their hearts would unconsciously become cold, and they would become a stranger. An emperor who did not have a heart of steel would not be able to sit on the throne. But whoever sat on the throne, whether it was a gentle and honest prince, or a prince who had tasted the sufferings of the world, or a prince who was full of sunshine, they would all end up in the same place. Bing-er seemed to feel something. She raised her head and looked at her brother. Her eyes were clear and bright. The little girl suddenly grinned. Her delicate little hand held Ouyang Shua's slightly rough big hand. It was the result of holding a sword for a long time. She said word by word, "Big brother, don't be afraid. Bing-er will accompany you." It was unknown when Bing-er's spotless heart sutra had reached a higher level. The little girl's heart became purer and purer. There was an indescribable charm in her coldness. She could understand people's hearts. Ouyang Shua was startled. Then, he laughed loudly. It was the kind of happy laughter that came from the bottom of his heart. It was like some kind of indescribable pressure had suddenly been vented. It was like walking alone in the dark and suddenly finding someone walking beside him with a lantern. It made him feel very warm. "I'm not afraid," Ouyang Shua said softly. It seemed like he was answering Bing-er, but it also seemed like he was talking to himself. "If there really is a cold abyss in front of me, I won't regret it." Ouyang Shua was different from the emperors of the past. He practiced inner canon of the yellow thearch. He was going to practice even more powerful technique. His ultimate goal was to understand his own body and see his true nature. Ouyang Shua believed that he would be able to transcend in the end. He would be able to step on the demon of power. How, at this moment, Qi ran over with a few bamboos in his arms. As he ran, the bamboos kept falling. The little guy seemed to be enjoying the process. The siblings looked at each other and smiled when they saw him. Our little girl has really grown up. Ouyang Shua was both gratified and a little disappointed. At this moment, Su Chu came to report. Lord Feng Chihuang has come to visit. He is waiting in the study. Ouyang Shua's eyes flashed with surprise. It was not normal for Feng Wu to come to Shanghai City at this time. Following the annexation of Lingxi City, the dragon-seeking acupuncture point became hostile. In addition, the various guilds were making their final preparations for the competition for the satellite cities after the Lantern Festival. Therefore, in the 4th year of Gaia, Ouyang Shua, the leader of the Shanghai Alliance, did not organize a routine alliance meeting. If there was something to discuss between members, they could drop by. For Feng Wu to come to Shanghai City before the Spring Festival, there must be something important. Ouyang Shua nodded and said, I understand. Su Chu immediately took his leave. I'll be leaving first. Accompany Qi well. Ouyang Shua said. Binger had already begun picking up the bamboos on the ground. She played with Qi and said, Brother, go do what you need to do. Ouyang Shua nodded and left the back garden. In the study, Feng Chihuang picked up the teacup and took a sip. It tasted bitter. Ouyang Shua's stance on the concubine marriage at the imperial court meeting had already spread throughout the wilderness. Feng Chihuang had completely extinguished that thought. She buried it deep in her heart and no longer thought about it. As fallen Phoenix City took over the entire Grand Peak province, Feng Chihuang realized that her perspective on problems had changed. She became similar to Ouyang Shua. Perhaps every feudal vassal was a loner without a family. When she took over Phoenix Soaring City and faced the Feng family again, Feng Chihuang was already calm. She no longer had any excess emotions in her heart. Most of the time, hatred was a manifestation of the weak. A true expert did not have hatred. That was because those that made her feel hatred had long been annihilated, no longer remaining in the world. If I can't let it go, then let it disappear completely. Accepting the Feng family, letting the Feng family's talents be used by her, and worshipping her was a decision that Feng Chihuang made recently. Of course, Feng Chihuang did not show mercy to those who betrayed her in the past. Some people were completely expelled from the family and driven out of the Grand Peak province. What awaited them was only endless loneliness and regret. This was the fate of betrayers. No one would sympathize with them. Most of the time, the wilderness was crueler than reality. Because there were no universal laws in the wilderness, it followed the complete law of the jungle, survival of the fittest. Just like the Hope Planet that humans were about to move to, it was a bloody war between the conqueror and the conquered. There was no warmth or mercy. Those who were not of my clan must have a different heart. Time has changed. The elders of the Feng family were also filled with emotions. In the blink of an eye, the color of the family had changed. The only thing that made them feel gratified was that Feng Chihuang still had the blood of the Feng family flowing in her body. This couldn't be erased. Perhaps it's time to change the family's tradition. The previous Feng family's patriarch said. On the first day of the first month, Feng Chihuang, a female member of the family, took over the family's scepter and took over the position of patriarch. This broke the tradition of the Feng family that had existed for thousands of years. On that day, all the female members of the Feng family had tears streaming down their faces. What about Feng Chihuang? She just calmly took over the scepter and, under the guidance of the Great Elder, read the unchanging declaration of the successor. No one knew if this Phoenix Queen's heart was in turmoil. Feng Chihuang was actually not far from the real throne. Sometimes, Feng Chihuang would suddenly envy Bai Hua, who was originally her biggest competitor. Following the annexation of Lingxi City, the two of them had already walked on two completely different paths and could no longer compete with each other. Bai Hua was relieved of the heavy burden on his shoulders, and could be at ease as a high official under Ouyang Shua's command. With the protection of a giant like Ouyang Shua, he no longer needed to grind his way forward. But what about Feng Qiuhuang? She seemed to have obtained supreme power, but she had walked on a path of no return. Cold and dark. And this was the path that Ouyang Shua had been walking on. That was the path of a king, the path of an emperor. On this path, Feng Qiuhuang could no longer see a single friend. Thus, at this time, Feng Qiuhuang especially wanted to see Ouyang Shua, the extraordinary man who had left an indelible mark in her life. Only in front of Ouyang Shua could Feng Qiuhuang open her mouth, hoping to find a trace of comfort. Deep in her heart, it was no longer so cold. In addition, Feng Qiuhuang also wanted to remind Ouyang Shua that a crisis was approaching Shanghai City. If Ouyang Shua didn't deal with it properly, Shanghai City might be in danger of being destroyed. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience. Chapter 809. Ouyang Shua had just stepped into the study when he sensed the chilly aura emitted from Feng Qiuhuang. Feng Qiuhuang had changed. She had become like him. A light flickered in Ouyang Shua's eyes as he greeted Feng Qiuhuang with a smile. He sat on his seat and adjusted himself into a comfortable position. The spring festival isn't over yet and you're already busy? Casting a glance at Ouyang Shua, Feng Qiuhuang helplessly said, "You still have the mood to laugh? What's wrong?" Ouyang Shua was puzzled. Feng Qiuhuang said, "I heard from the elders of the clan that Di Chen and the others are making a move again." Feng Qiuhuang's tone did not change at all when she mentioned the clan elders. It was as if she was talking about an ordinary official. When he saw this, Ouyang Shua was even more certain that Feng Qiuhuang had really taken the path of a king. Truly amazing! Not only in China but also in the world. Ouyang Shua waved his hand and said, "Let them be. In any case, they won't be able to cause any big wave." Towards the Yan-Huang alliance, Ouyang Shua had always liked to remain silent and would never cause trouble for them. However, if Di Chen and the others wanted to set up a trap for the Shanghai City, Ouyang Shua would arrive first and deal a fatal blow. This was the case in the Battle of Yunnan. Ouyang Shua was not in the mood to play cat and mouse with Di Chen and the others. Today you set me up, tomorrow I'll set you up, back and forth. What was the point? Rebuilding Shanghai City was the way of the king. Scheming and scheming were ultimately just a small path. For example, if Ouyang Shua wanted to deal with the Shu Han dynasty, they would have to fight on the battlefield in the end. This attempt to drive a wedge between Pang Tong and himself was merely an aid, an act of convenience. Di Chen and the others played these tricks all day, and they didn't feel tired at all. It's different this time. You have to be careful. Feng Qiuhuang's expression was solemn. Ouyang Shua was stunned, and when he saw Feng Qiuhuang's expression didn't seem to be fake, he stood up and asked, "Tell me, what tricks are they playing this time? Assassination, sowing discord, or joining forces?" "Neither." What Feng Qiuhuang said next caused Ouyang Shua to frown. In the end, Ouyang Shua was just a commoner and didn't know how big the world was. He had also underestimated the power of aristocratic families. Many things in the world were hidden above the clouds and were not something he could touch. Just like the quantum world, what you see is not the whole world. The story had to start from the era of Earth. Before the establishment of the Earth Federation, there was not much interaction between the world's aristocratic families. Especially between the East and the West, there was a natural barrier. With the establishment of the Earth Federation and the integration of the world, these aristocratic families slowly came together in order to resist the federal government on the surface. They secretly set up an organization called the Silver Hand, and the families of Di Chen and the others were members of it. The Di family was a core member of the Silver Hand. The tentacles of the Silver Hand had reached almost every corner of the Federation. Only a few people knew of their existence, including the academics led by the Federation president. The main members of the academic faction were all Federation officials who had graduated from professional schools. Furthermore, they were mainly from the grassroots and had some innate conflict with the aristocratic families. It was their duty to eliminate the privileges of the aristocratic families. It was precisely because of the existence of the academics that the Silver Hand could not be unbridled in the Federation. The struggle between the two had accompanied the growth of the entire Federation. The arrival of the Doomsday made the Silver Hand face a huge test. The soil and foundation that they relied on for survival suddenly faced a devastating impact. The academics seized the opportunity to counterattack and realize a desperate counterattack. The calculation of the first achievement value and the second calculation of the game achievement value were the ideas of the academics to completely smash the sharp weapon of the Silver Hand, so that they would lose their privileges and be unable to tyrannize on planet Hope. Of course, the Silver Hand did not give in easily. What followed was naturally a game of chess. The treatment of the special game cabin, as well as the confidentiality of the Earth, the qualification for internal testing, the game insider information, and so on, were all fought for by the Silver Hand. In the face of this behemoth, even the Federation president had to compromise sometimes. In addition to the above, the Silver Hand did not give up the ambition to dominate the Earth. In their minds, as long as they could maintain a transcendent position in the game. According to the second calculation of the game's achievement value, they could still win. The only thing that the Silver Hand did not expect was that Gaia was on the side of the academic. The perfect mechanism of the Earth left them with basically no loopholes to exploit. The fair game environment made the Silver Hand feel restrained. As a result, it was inevitable that there would be grassroots players who used the Earth to complete a counterattack and become the backbone of the fight against the Silver Hand on planet Hope. For this reason, before the interstellar migration, there was an agreement within the Silver Hand. Once there was an uncontrollable anomaly that was enough to threaten the survival of the Silver Hand, the other members were obliged to cooperate with the members of that country to eradicate the anomaly and maintain the order of the game world. This agreement was the 15th clause. The White Hand even made a detailed classification of the anomaly, delineating it into 3 levels: dangerous, extremely dangerous, and disaster. The higher the level, the more importance the Silver Hand attached to it. For the dangerous level, it was enough to use the members of that country, so there was no need to activate the 15th clause. For the extremely dangerous level, the clause needed to be activated, and the members had to provide assistance to the members of that country within their ability. As for the final disaster level, that would be incredible. Once it was rated as a disaster level, all the members of the Silver Hand had to take action and do their best to extinguish the anomaly at all costs. Ouyang Shua and his Shanghai city had undoubtedly become the biggest anomaly in the game. After the defeat in the Battle of Yunnan, Di Chun and the others finally admitted in frustration that the power of the Yen-Huang alliance alone could no longer contain the rise of Shanghai city. They were no longer able to eliminate this anomaly. Di Chun thought it was time to activate the 15th clause. The proposal was approved by Lord Chunshan, Warwolf, Xiongba, and Feng Qingyang, and it had already come into effect. On New Year's Eve before the Spring Festival, the Silver Hand activated Article 15. Originally, the anomaly level submitted by Di Chen was disaster, but after the decision of the Round Table Conference of the Silver Hand, it was lowered to the extremely dangerous level. What Ouyang Shua did not know was that William of the English region and Henry of the French region had tactfully spoken up for him at the Round Table Conference, allowing Shanghai city to escape. It was obvious that if the Silver Hand really went all out, Shanghai city would be severely injured even if it did not die. Even the current extremely dangerous level was enough to make Shanghai city suffer. At the same time, in the eyes of Jack Dawson and the others, the existence of Shanghai city was far from posing a direct threat to them. If they rated it as a disaster level right from the start, it would really damage the prestige of the Silver Hand. Don't tell me that we, the Silver Hand, are going to be scared to the point of wetting our pants by a territory that has not yet been established? If that's the case, where can we put our faces? Jack Dawson said at the Round Table Conference. The Hand of Silver had extraordinary pride. This was also why Shanghai City rose step by step in the wilderness, once pressuring the Yen-Huang alliance to the point of being unable to breathe. Di Chun and the others had never thought of using the power of the members of other countries to contain Shanghai City. It was only after the end of the Battle of Yunnan that Di Chun and the others had no choice but to bow their heads and admit defeat. Even so, Di Chun and the others became the laughingstock of the organization, unable to lift their heads. If possible, Di Chun hoped that the 15th clause would never be activated. In addition, Jack and the others did not want to rate Ouyang Shuo as a disaster, because of strategic considerations. The strength of the Silver Hand, in addition to their own strength, also lay in their extremely strong concealment. Even the academics did not necessarily know all the members of the Silver Hand. However, once Ouyang Shuo was rated as a disaster, the Silver Hand would be completely exposed to the world. If the academics took advantage of this and used Shanghai City as an opportunity to incite the world's grassroots players to crusade against the Silver Hand, then the future of the Silver Hand would not be easy. Not to mention containing and destroying Shanghai City, they would not even be able to protect themselves. Compared to the real world, the number of players in the game could sometimes play a decisive role. Take the China region for example, there were tens of millions of grassroots players. If all of them stood up against the Yen-Huang alliance, it would be enough to uproot the Yen-Huang alliance, leaving not even a trace. Even within the Yen-Huang alliance, there were many grassroots players. Having said that, as long as the Silver Hand did not jump out of their own accord, no matter how much the academics incited, no one would believe them. The players were not fools, and they would not be so easily incited. Otherwise, the Yen-Huang alliance would not have been able to survive until now. For the grassroots players to collectively riot, they needed a strong opportunity. Jack and the others were not fools, and they would not voluntarily give such an opportunity to the academics. For all these reasons, Di Chen's proposal of a disaster level was not approved. Di Chen was very regretful about this. In Di Chen's opinion, Ouyang Shuo was somewhat evil, and he had an extraordinary understanding of the game Earth on Earth. Since the organization had made a move, they had to go all out. Otherwise, there might be some unforeseen changes. Di Chen was afraid. Even so, the fight still has to continue, Di Chen said. After the 15th clause came into effect, the members of the Silver Hand all over the world would do their best to assist the Yen-Huang alliance to curb the rise of the wilderness. An invisible net had already begun to envelop Shanghai City. Because of this, as soon as Feng Qiuhuang received the news, she immediately rushed to Shanghai City to inform. If Feng Qiuhuang had not returned to the Feng family and taken over as the head of the Feng family, Ouyang Shuo would have been kept in the dark about this matter from the Great Elder. Mobile users, please browse and enjoy a better reading experience. Chapter 810. After listening to Feng Qiuhuang's narration, Ouyang Shuo regained his composure. Silver Hand? It's getting more and more interesting. Ouyang Shuo actually smiled, his eyes filled with fighting spirit. Previously, Ouyang Shuo was still worried that if Shanghai City caused too much of a commotion in the game, the achievement points he would receive after arriving at Hope Planet would exceed the limits of some people. If that happened, would someone cheat and declare the achievement points of Earth on Lu invalid? It was not impossible. It was like a person going to the casino to gamble. If he won more than the casino could bear, he should consider whether he could leave the casino with dignity instead of thinking of earning more money. After all, no matter how much money he needed to be alive to spend it. What do you plan to do? Feng Qiuhuang asked. Ouyang Shuo smiled and casually looked up at the sky. He said pointedly, "What else can I do? Naturally, I'll obediently join the academic faction and find a big tree to shelter me from the wind and rain." Just as he finished his sentence, Ouyang Shuo acutely sensed a white light flash in the sky. When Feng Qiuhuang saw it, a glint flashed in his eyes as he fell into deep thought. Since Gaia was on the academic faction's side, Ouyang Shuo believed that his words would be understood by Gaia and passed on to the academic faction's leader. No one's every move in the game could escape Gaia's eyes. However, Gaia had to abide by the 3 laws of robotics. Without authorization, it could not divulge a player's privacy. Ouyang Shuo's actions were a form of authorization. Since he could not contact the academic faction, it was naturally appropriate for Gaia to pass on the message. From the looks of it, Silver Hand could not cover the sky with one hand. It still had a powerful opponent, the academic faction. Ouyang Shuo did not mind temporarily joining the academic faction and becoming their lackey. Trying to form a faction when he was not strong enough was tantamount to striking a rock with an egg. Ouyang Shuo had been tempered in the wilderness and was no longer a childish idealist. With the academic faction backing him, Ouyang Shuo could fight against Silver Hand with peace of mind. The future Hope Planet was the opportunity for Ouyang Shuo to truly break free from the shackles of the 2 factions and grow freely. Only on the planet could Ouyang Shuo truly establish his foundation. If he only focused on the game, he was destined to be a rootless tree. Who knew that at this moment, Ouyang Shuo's horizons would rise to a completely new height? Not only was he plotting in the game, but he was also making all sorts of preparations for the future Planet Hope. The game couldn't affect reality. However, the people who played the game were all real people. Since they were people, they could affect reality. "Feng Wu, thank you so much," Ouyang Shuo said sincerely. Feng Qiuhuang smiled sweetly and said, "We are friends." Ouyang Shuo nodded and looked at each other with a smile. The 2 chatted for another hour or so before Feng Qiuhuang stood up and bade farewell. When Feng Qiuhuang was about to step into the teleportation formation, Ouyang Shuo suddenly said, "Feng Wu, don't be afraid. You're not alone." When he saw Feng Qiuhuang this time, Ouyang Shuo could clearly sense that she had something on her mind. However, when they were chatting, Feng Qiuhuang would always hesitate, not knowing where to start. Ouyang Shuo thought that Feng Qiuhuang might have encountered the same predicament as him. The road was dark and cold. Ouyang Shuo couldn't bear to let such an extraordinary lady travel alone. Feng Qiuhuang's body trembled. After a long time, she turned around and gave Ouyang Shuo a bright smile. "I won't be afraid anymore." Ouyang Shuo smiled back and thought, "Congratulations, my friend." While Ouyang Shuo was meeting Feng Qiuhuang, a huge net had already been secretly unfolded. Pacific Ocean, Hawaiian Islands. On the vast ocean, a second-class sailing battleship had just finished resting in Hawaii and was once again on its voyage, braving the winds and waves as it headed for Japan. The 4th system update that had just ended not only increased the movement speed of the army, but the speed of the battleship had also been increased, making long-distance sailing much easier. The battleship had set off from the west coast of Marika and arrived at Hawaii, which was located in the center of the Pacific Ocean, in less than 5 days. In another week, the battleship would arrive at Japan. The Statue of Liberty hung on the battleship indicated that it was a battleship that belonged to Marika's Liberty City. 2 middle-aged men stood on the deck, one scholarly and the other military. From their demeanor, they should be the core members of the battleship. "Sir Clerk, why do we have to travel thousands of miles to deliver precious technical manuals to the Japanese?" The one who spoke was a military officer, who was also the captain of the battleship. He was wearing a standard Western military uniform and had a dueling sword at his waist as well as a Western flintlock pistol. "Don't ask what you shouldn't ask." The military officer was the clerk of Liberty City. He had a high status and power, so he appeared much calmer. He wore a double-horned hat on his head and held an exquisite walking stick in his hand. Coupled with his slightly curled mustache, he looked very unique. This time, they were ordered by the feudal lord to deliver 3 sets of the most precious technical manuals of Liberty City to the feudal lords of Japan and China at the low price of 1 million gold coins. The goods included the manufacturing technology for steam engines, looms, and sailing battleship. The only thing that Liberty City retained was their core firearm manufacturing technology. The clerk did not know the inside story of this matter. When the feudal lord gave this task to him, he was filled with doubts like the captain. However, in front of the military officer, he naturally had to act like he knew the inside story. Otherwise, how could he show that he had a close relationship with the feudal lord? The captain really thought there was some inside story and did not dare to inquire further. He smiled and changed the topic. Speaking of which, this was the first time the Liberty City fleet had crossed the Pacific Ocean. It was of great significance. Japan, Mikasa City. Keisuke Honda read the secret letter that Jack Dawson had written to him. He was full of smiles and was in a very good mood. As a traditional ally of the United States in Asia, even after the formation of the Federation, the Japanese followed the footsteps of the Americans within the Silver Hand and served them all the way. Of course, the Japanese did not return the favor. Just like this technology authorization, on the surface, Mikasa City was the same as Handan City and other territories in the China region. They only received 3 kinds of technical manuals, but there were other mysteries in the dark. Not only did Jack send more than 100 related technical personnel to Mikasa City, but he also prepared 1,000 firearms in the cabin and gave them to Mikasa City. In this way, Mikasa City could be one step ahead of the Yen-Wang alliance. Keisuke Honda was already fantasizing about leading the fleet to loot the coast of the China region. France, Vic City. Henry sat in his office, reading a letter word by word. The letter was sent by the Silver Hand, hinting that Vic City should not be too close to Shanghai City in the affairs of the Mediterranean Sea. If possible, it was best to cut off the supply of supplies to the base city. After reading the letter, Henry's expression was uncertain. He finally seized the opportunity to join forces with Shanghai City to drive the Spanish fleet out of the Mediterranean Sea, allowing Vic City's fleet to gain valuable sea control and gain huge profits from the ocean trade. Who would have thought that such a change would happen? Without the assistance of the Mediterranean Sea Fleet, Henry was not sure that he could defeat the Spanish fleet. Not to mention the newly rising Caesar, not only was it aggressive on the European continent, but it also recently formed a naval fleet with the intention of getting involved in the Mediterranean Sea. The situation in the entire Mediterranean Sea suddenly became complicated and confusing. Spain, Tortosa City. Casillas also received a secret letter from the Silver Hand. But compared to Henry, Casillas's expression was very different. He looked happy, and his eyes flashed with the light of revenge. This is great, I finally have a chance to get revenge for the last time. After more than half a year of dormancy, the Spanish fleet had been rebuilt, but due to the existence of the Mediterranean Alliance, they did not dare to go to sea easily. The sudden intervention of the Silver Hand gave the Spanish a great opportunity. England, Avic Castle. As a core member of the Silver Hand, William naturally would not receive any warnings. After all, the Silver Hand was just a loose, mysterious organization, and there was no mandatory binding force on its members, especially the powerful core members. Whether to carry out the organization's instructions or not, and how to carry them out, were all up to them. Compared to Henry's Vic City, William's Avic Castle and Shanghai City had deeper interests. As the starting and ending points on the Grand Line, the two cities had the biggest profit. It was impossible for William to give up this fat piece of meat. William even used the Silver Hand to draw a bottom line for the members of the Mediterranean Sea. The Mediterranean Sea could be chaotic, but it must not affect the merchant ships passing through the Mediterranean Sea. At the same time, Sky City. Sky City was not only the residence of Gaia, but also the leisure place of the Federation president and other bigwigs. In a small courtyard in the west of the city, there was a 2-story wooden White House. There was a garden in front and back of the house, with all kinds of exotic flowers and grasses in bloom, and countless colorful butterflies and bees came and went among the flowers. The lawn of the garden was taken care of extremely beautifully, and it was obvious that the owner of the house was a thoughtful person. And he had extraordinary taste. On the lawn, an old man in plain clothes was bending over to water a pot of roses, looking serene and focused. Who would have thought that this inconspicuous old man was the leader of the academics, the dignified Federation president? Behind the old man stood a beautiful woman with a cold expression. If there were players present, they would be obsessed, because this woman was the incarnation of Gaia, the most beautiful woman in human history. After waiting for a while, the old man finally turned around, put down the sprinkler in his hand, looked at the beautiful woman, and asked gently, "Did he really say that?" "Yes." Gaia was still expressionless. The old man didn't care and said with a smile, "What an interesting little friend. Do you need to respond to him?" The old man waved his hand and said, "Not for the time being, let's see how he gets through this first." "Understood." With that, Gaia turned into a white light and disappeared. The old man picked up the sprinkler again and went to take care of his treasures. Chapter 8:11. February 10th, 12th of the first month, Southwest University China Hall. On Meteor Island by the Full Moon Lake. What used to be a barren island was now covered in green and beautiful grass after great-grandfather took care of it. The only thing that didn't change was the small wooden house on the island and the bamboo forest in front of it. Although it was winter, it wasn't cold in Shanghai City. Meteor Island was especially warm because of the geothermal heat. The bamboo forest was green and green. The fresh bamboo that fed Qi came from this small bamboo forest. Under the bamboo forest there was a game of Go. Ouyang Shuo and great-grandfather sat opposite each other, playing Go with the wind. The Southwest University China Hall was on the right track. The daily affairs were handled by the vice president and the deans. Jiang Shang didn't need to worry about it. Ouyang Shuo put down a black chess piece and suddenly asked, "Great-grandfather, are you willing to help me?" The establishment of the cabinet had been discussed in the territory. In principle, the cabinet would have 1 prime minister and 6 vice ministers. It could be adjusted according to the specific situation. Ouyang Shuo would decide who the cabinet would be. Xiao He and the other ministers thought that it would be best to ask Jiang Shang to take the position of prime minister. There were 2 reasons. First, great-grandfather was highly respected. Second, he used to be a grand preceptor. He had both integrity and talent. Integrity and talent was also a hard requirement to select a cabinet member. Ouyang Shuo had the same idea. Therefore, he visited Meteor Island again. Jiang Shang wasn't surprised. He put down a white chess piece. His move was much better than Ouyang Shuo's. The white chess piece was about to take shape and trap the black chess piece. "I'm old. I'm afraid I've let you down." Ouyang Shuo also smiled. Great-grandfather's inner breath is long and continuous, and his body is full of vitality. How can he be called old? The biggest difference between the game and history was that there were authentic martial arts manuals. Although Jiang Shang's cultivation wasn't as amazing as in Investiture of the Gods, he was still a Taoist. His internal energy cultivation was no less than Ouyang Shuo's. Gaia had spent a lot of effort to create these saint-level characters. How could he let them be defeated by time? Great-grandfather's old was just his skin. When a saint-level character transformed into a biohuman in the future, his physical fitness would be the strongest. Jiang Shang smiled. Jiuanshang's eyes are like a torch. This old man cannot refuse. Ouyang Shuo had gone through 1,000 hardships and finally managed to invite this saint-level character out of the sect. Name, Jiang Shang, Saint-Tyr. Title, Martial Sage, Master of the 100 Schools. Dynasty, Western Zhou. Identity, Principal of Southwest University China Hall. Profession, Unparalleled State Knight. Loyalty, 85 Commander, 88 the Strength, 75 Intelligence, 98 Politics, 100 Specialty, Governance, increases territorial administrative efficiency by 55, increases territorial political index by 15, increases territorial military index by 15, increases territorial popular sentiment by 45. Classic, The Six Secret Arts, Evaluation. Taigong Wang, Qi Zhu Fu, Zhaoge Zhu Tu, Ziliang Zhu Fu, Ji Jin Qi, Wen Wang. Taigong Wang governed the country. Because of its customs, it simplified its etiquette. Through trade and industry, it benefited from fish and salt. Many people returned to Qi, making Qi a great country. The attributes of a saint-level character were indeed overbearing. Even his profession was a customized version of unparalleled state knight. Jiang Shang's four-dimensional attributes were the same as Sun Wu's. He had no shortcomings, and his politics attribute was full point. Unlike Sun Wu, Jiang Shang had officially become an official, and his specialty was finally revealed. Governance as specialty was too overbearing. Out of the four attributes, two of them directly increased the territory index. The whole thing was an all-around improvement. After checking the attributes, Ouyang Shuo laughed heartily. Even his chess pieces became lighter. Jiang Shang followed suit and smiled. Jiuan Shang, you've lost. People should not be too complacent. In the blink of an eye, the black pieces were trapped and could not move. I admit defeat, I admit defeat. Ouyang Shuo gave up and surrendered. Looking at a corner of the chessboard, he saw a black piece surrounded by more than 10 white pieces. It seemed that there was no chance for it to break out. He took the opportunity to ask, "Grandpa, if Shanghai City is this black piece and the enemy is this group of white pieces, how should we break out of this situation?" Ouyang Shuo thought of the encirclement and suppression of Shanghai City by the silver hand. Jiang Shang knew that the Juanshang must be referring to something. He had long seen that the Juanshang was different from before. He seemed to have something on his mind and seemed to have encountered some troublesome matters recently. "Please enlighten me, Juanshang." Since Jiang Shang had agreed to become an official, he would not be stingy with his wisdom. Ouyang Shuo nodded and explained in detail about the silver hand. Jiang Shang pondered for a moment and slowly said, "The Juanshang chose to side with the academics and take advantage of its power. This is not wrong. However, this is not enough. Even if you are a chess piece, you must be a chess piece that will not be easily abandoned by the player. Once the player abandons a chess piece, the game will be lost. In this way, the chess piece and the player can rely on each other for fortune and misfortune." "What does Grandpa mean?" Jiang Shang asked. "Who is the opponent of the silver hand? The academics?" "No." Jiang Shang shook his head and said, "No one can guarantee that after the academics defeated the silver hand, they will not become the next silver hand. It is a battle of ideas and also a battle of interest. The real opponent of the silver hand is the hundreds of millions of ordinary mutants. As long as the Juanshang can unite a large number of ordinary mutants and tie their interests with the interests of Shanghai City, you will be invincible. When that time comes, even if the academics wanted to abandon a chess piece, it would be impossible." Ouyang Shuo's eyes lit up and said, "Just like the Bank of the Four Seas?" Jiang Shang nodded and said, "Yes, the Bank of the Four Seas is in line with this principle. However, this is far from enough. Since the Juanshang wants to achieve great things, you should show the magnanimity that an emperor should have. Learn to accept and control mutants instead of shutting them out." "I understand." Ouyang Shuo's eyes were firm. Jiang Shang nodded with a smile on his face. "Oh right." Ouyang Shuo suddenly thought of something and asked, "Regarding the matter of the name of the country, Do you have any opinions? After a few days of discussion, the mainstream opinion was to inherit one of the three ancient names, Xia, Shang, and Zhou. The reason was that the names of the spring and autumn warring states period were too strong, such as Qin and Jin, which already had owners. The remaining names were somewhat lacking and did not deserve to be the first country to be established in the wilderness. Only three ancient names could bear the weight, and there was still disagreement as to which one to choose. The Xia dynasty was the first hereditary dynasty recorded in China's history books, and it was also the starting point of the concept of a country. Xia meant people of China. The saying of Huaxia originated from the Xia dynasty. Xia evolved from the place of having Xia residence and Great Xia to the name of a tribe, and then became the name of a country. Of course, by now, the house that people lived in had evolved into the word mansion, which was different from the word Xia. It was said that the founder of the Xia dynasty, the Xia clan, was a descendant of the Zhuanshu tribe. It was a tribe formed by the intermarriage of the Zhuanshu clan, a descendant of the Yellow Emperor, and the Gonggong clan, a descendant of the Yan Emperor. Because the Xia dynasty was the starting point, it was in line with Shanghai City's position as the first country to be established in the wilderness. Therefore, most people supported inheriting the name of the country. The Shang dynasty was the first dynasty to have written records of the same period, and it was at the peak of slavery. There was also a Shang cauldron placed in the heaven altar of Shanghai City, which could be considered a trace of origin. The ancestor of the Shang dynasty, Qi, had helped you control the flood and was granted the title of Shangyi. Thus, the name of the country was chosen as Shang. Qi was the son of Emperor Ku, the great-grandson of the Yellow Emperor, and one of the 5 emperors. Therefore, the Shang clan was also a descendant of the Yellow Emperor. However, the Shang dynasty was located in the middle of the 3 ancient dynasties, neither superior nor inferior, so it had very few supporters. The Zhou dynasty was the last hereditary slave dynasty, and it was also the birthplace of the 100 schools of thought, so it had a deeper relationship with Shanghai City. Therefore, many people supported this name. If Shanghai City inherited the name of the country, there would immediately be a group of talented people. The Yellow Emperor lived in Jishui, taking Ji as his clan, and the people of Zhou took his surname. The people of Zhou were forced by the Xuanyu Rong to leave their homeland. They went through many hardships and crossed Qi, Ju, and Liang mountains to move to Zhouyuan, south of Qi Mountain in the Wei River Valley. Thus, the concept of Zhou was born. The word Zhou was originally written as upper field, lower mouth, upper and lower combined. Later, it evolved into the word Zhou. However, the Zhou dynasty was actually Western Zhou and Eastern Zhou. During the spring and autumn warring states period, when the 100 schools of thought were born, the Zhou dynasty's existence became weaker and weaker. Just this point alone was not enough to make the final decision. The 3 ancient dynasties were all descendants of Yan and Huang, and they could all represent the orthodoxy. Even Ouyang Shuao was currently hovering between Xia and Zhou. Jiang Shang's expression suddenly became somewhat complicated. After a long time, he said, "I once helped Zhou destroy the Shang and was deeply involved. In order to avoid arousing suspicion, it is best that I do not participate. As for the choice, it is up to you, Lord." Ouyang Shuo nodded, seeming to understand what Jiang Shang meant. Ouyang Shuo suddenly remembered that during the Battle of Mai, King Wang of Zhou had indirectly died in his hands. Thinking of this, Ouyang Shuo felt his hair stand on end. Ouyang Shuo shook off the thoughts in his mind and asked one last question. Great-grandfather is going to take up a post in the imperial cabinet. Does the academy have a candidate to recommend? Southwest University China Hall was one of the foundations of the territory, and it was also the gathering place of the 100 schools of thought. With Jiang Shang gone, Ouyang Shuo could not just randomly find someone to replace him. Otherwise, there would be trouble. Jiang Shang, however, already had a candidate in mind. he said, "Kong Chiu is fine." Ouyang Shuo was greatly surprised. Old Master Kong is willing to come out of seclusion? If it was Confucius who replaced Jiang Shang as the principal of Southwest University China Hall, there would be no problem at all. However, Confucius was obsessed with the reconstruction of Confucianism, so it would not be easy to invite him. "Don't worry, Lord. This old man will personally invite him." Ouyang Shuo smiled. That couldn't be better. With Jiang Shang, who was half a teacher to Confucius, there would not be any problems. This could also be considered as relieving one of Ouyang Shuo's worries. Seeing that it was already late, Ouyang Shuo stood up to bid farewell. "Tomorrow, I will respectfully await great-grandfather's arrival at the Protectorate Manor." He wanted to discuss the future structure of the dynasty with Jiang Shang, Xiao He, and the others. Jiang Shang nodded and stood up to see his guest out. Chapter 8:12. On the 12th of February, the day before the Lantern Festival, a piece of news shook the entire China region. The Protector General of Shanghai City announced that Shanghai City would recruit 5 million players from the 9 great king cities and distribute them to the 3 provinces, 16 prefectures, 81 prefectures, and more than 400 counties. The recruitment this time was still for players of the professions. What was different was that Shanghai City was unprecedentedly open to casual players. According to the announcement, as long as they met the requirements and were willing to settle down in the counties of Shanghai City, they would be able to enjoy the basic welfare of the territory. The local government offices would provide free housing for these players and provide them with necessities every month to ensure their basic needs and allow them to enjoy their old age in the game. The announcement made it very clear that there would be 1 million casual players, which was 20% of the total number of recruits. For this reason, the Civil Affairs Bureau of the Protectorate of Nanjiang would provide 4 million gold coins to carry out this resettlement plan. Basically, Ouyang Shuo would fork out all the profits from the sale of weapons and equipment. At the same time, the Protectorate of Nanjiang would also borrow 3 million gold coins from the Bank of the Four Seas to ensure the smooth implementation of the plan. With the additional funds from the counties, the total amount of funds would exceed 10 million gold coins. If the cost of housing and welfare were included, it would be an astronomical figure. When the news came out, everyone's first reaction was, "Shanghai City has gone crazy." Of course, Ouyang Shuo wasn't crazy. He had discussed this plan with the Civil Affairs Bureau for an entire day before coming up with it. The announcement was only an outline of the plan. Following this, the Financial Department, the Inspectorate, the Industry and Development Plan, and the Bank of the Four Seas would cooperate with the Civil Affairs Bureau to formulate a detailed resettlement plan. The counties would also formulate a resettlement plan according to the local conditions and report it to the Civil Affairs Bureau. The entire resettlement plan would be a huge project that would require at least 1 to 2 months to complete. It would take at least half a year to truly settle down and get on the right track. Moreover, this was only the first step in Ouyang Shuo's plan of immigration. There were nearly 100 million players in the China region, and Ouyang Shuo's ambition was for Shanghai City to take in at least 30% of them. He wanted them to live under the rule of Shanghai City and get used to its management. Of course, the prerequisite was for Shanghai City to further expand its territory. 5 million people was the upper limit of immigration that the Civil Affairs Bureau had calculated overnight. Any more would not only have a fatal impact on the industries of the counties, but it would also be a huge burden on the county's finances. On the surface, this was a losing deal. In fact, that was not the case. First, casual players only accounted for 20% of the total. This time, the recruitment targets were mainly families. Families with elderly and children would generally have several lifestyle players. Some elderly people were even lifestyle players themselves. In the 22nd century, humans generally lived a long life. People in their 50s or 60s could be considered middle-aged. As a result, the grandchildren of the truly old players had long since grown up, and the great-grandchildren of the slightly older players had already grown up. Using a casual player slot to trap 4 lifestyle players was worth it. Otherwise, Ouyang Shuo would not have been confident in recruiting 4 million lifestyle players in one go. After all, the underground world was about to be opened, and the shortage of raw materials in King City would soon be filled. Secondly, increase the population and promote the territory's financial growth. The development of the various territories in the wilderness had always been uneven, and many of the 3 provinces that Shanghai City had conquered were still far from being saturated with people. Coupled with the fact that they had experienced a series of wars, it had resulted in an awkward situation where the territory was vast but the population was scarce. This was especially so for the first-level counties. Most of them were forcibly promoted from third-level counties. On average, a county city had a population shortage of 300,000 people. Just the first-level counties alone had a population shortage of more than 4 million people. With the destruction of the territory's stone monument, the population growth of the various counties basically came to a halt. No matter how fast the newborn natives grew, they could not be counted on. Their contribution to the county's population was nearly zero. According to the latest statistics from the Civil Affairs Bureau, at the end of Gaia's 3rd year, the territory's total population was only 25 million. The 3 provinces that Shanghai City occupied were already close to the size of the Ming and Qing dynasties. After all, the Ming dynasty's population had once exceeded 150 million. The Qing dynasty's population was even more terrifying, reaching 43.6 billion. In comparison, Shanghai City was too pitiful. However, Ouyang Shuo did not dare to bring in too many players at once. Once the ratio of players to NPCs became out of balance, it would cause a destructive impact on the weak governance systems of the various counties. He could only bring in a batch first and slowly digest them before bringing in a second batch. The digestion process was also the process of the various counties' rapid development. According to the Finance Bureau's calculations, as long as Shanghai City absorbed the 5 million immigrants, its financial revenue would increase by at least 30%. With this calculation, the initial investment of 10 million gold coins was very worth it. It was also for this reason that after taking over Yunnan city-state, Ouyang Shuo changed Shanghai City's strategy from internal to external. He did not plan on taking action against North Sichuan city-state and South Xiangnan city-state for the time being. He was in no hurry to do anything to Jiangchuan province and Minnan province. Ouyang Shuo's goal was very simple. He wanted to use the characteristic of the territory's stone monument to constantly spawn refugees to reserve as many natives as possible. This was so that the next time he brought in players, he could open up a bigger gap. Thirdly, he would appropriately reduce the ratio of soldiers to civilians. After this round of military reorganization, Shanghai City's field corps alone numbered 16, with a total military strength of 1.12 million. It did not seem terrifying. However, if the Navy's 5 fleets and the various counties' garrison divisions were included, the total military strength would be close to 1.9 million. According to the total population of 25 million, the ratio of soldiers to civilians was 1:12. It was already very close to the danger level. By bringing in 5 million players at once, it would allow the territory to catch a breather. The above 3 points were only secondary factors. Ouyang Shuo's main goal was to carry out the advice that his grandfather had given him previously. He wanted to drag as many grassroots players as possible onto the big ship that was Shanghai City. Only then would he not become an abandoned pawn. Regardless of Ouyang Shuo's considerations, the 9 great royal cities were in a complete uproar because of Shanghai City's announcement. There were those who agreed and those who disagreed. The underground world was about to be opened, and the ambitious players were naturally unwilling to leave the royal city at this time. However, there were also some players who were tired of the various bloody battles that the various guilds had launched over the satellite cities. They were willing to move to Shanghai City to live a peaceful life. This was especially true for those who had elderly or children at home. The real battle for the satellite cities had not even begun, and the various guilds were already in a killing frenzy. It was not hard to imagine how fierce the official battle would be after the Lantern Festival ended. It would not be an exaggeration to say that there would be rivers of blood. At that time, it was unknown how many players would reincarnate, and their 3 years of hard work would go down the drain. Regardless, Shanghai City's recruitment order was still very popular. After Shanghai City took over Yunnan City, the players of the China server recognized Shanghai City as the overlord. It was safer to settle down in Shanghai City than in the royal city. Shanghai City, Ouyang Shua's study. Besides recruiting 5 million players, Ouyang Shua was also preparing other means to deal with the imminent threat of the Silver Hand. In the study sat the 2 leaders of the intelligence agencies, Shen Buhai and the Black Snake. Previously, Ouyang Shua had divided the work between the Shanghai Guards and the Black Snake Guards, but the division was not thorough. Because of this, it not only caused the 2 intelligence agencies to cross paths, but it also resulted in redundant personnel and a waste of funds. To make matters worse, because of the cross-competition, there were surveillance blind spots and blind spots. For example, the intelligence error in the Yunnan battle was caused by the 2 intelligence agencies' eagerness to perform, but they lost their cool. After that black incident, the 3 intelligence agencies conducted a thorough introspection. Ouyang Shua looked at their investigation report and felt rather guilty. Using the opportunity of the Silver Hand casting a net on Shanghai City, Ouyang Shua was prepared to completely separate the 2 intelligence agencies, leaving no hidden dangers. All the operations of the Black Snake Guards in the China server, including the spies and spies, will be handed over to the Shanghai Guards. Ouyang Shua's first sentence shocked the Black Snake. "My lord." The Black Snake's face was pale. He thought that his lord was blaming him for the black incident. Could it be that the Black Snake Guards have lost the Lord's trust? The Black Snake felt bitter. Once the intelligence agency lost the Lord's trust, it could only be disbanded. Even Shen Buhai was a little surprised and could not make up his mind. Ouyang Shua waved his hand, gesturing for the 2 to calm down. He asked Shen Buhai, "After the Shanghai Guards take over, do you have the confidence to investigate the mutants?" Shen Buhai was a rigid person. He seriously thought about it before answering. There will be a period of adaptation. After that, there shouldn't be too many problems. The Shanghai Guards were no longer in the initial stage. There were also mutants under their command. Moreover, the Shanghai Guards had also accumulated some experience in monitoring the Black Snake Guard. However, it was not an easy task to take over all of them. "How long will it take?" Ouyang Shua asked. Shen Buhai did not hesitate and said, 2 months. Ouyang Shua stretched out 3 fingers and said calmly, "I will give you 3 months. If you mess up, you know the consequences." Shen Buhai felt a chill in his heart when he heard this. "My lord, please rest assured. If I can't do it, I will willingly offer my head." Shen Buhai made a military pledge. Ouyang Shua nodded and looked at the Black Snake, who had calmed down a little. He said, "The Black Snake Guards have to cooperate with the Shanghai Guards and complete the relevant handover work as soon as possible. I will give you half a month. Is that enough?" The Black Snake's voice was dry, but he had not lost his judgment. He calculated in his heart and replied, "Enough." If he really wanted to handle the handover, the main things would be the roster of the informants, spies, and other members, as well as their contact information, a full set of intelligence files, and finally the major intelligence stations. Most of the information could be completed at the headquarters in Shanghai City. Chapter 8:13. What Black Snake was worried about naturally did not happen. Even though he, as the commander of the Black Snake Guards, should take responsibility for the dark intelligence incident that took place in the Yunnan War, he had already been punished. Ouyang Shua looked at the Black Serpent again and said, "After you're done with the domestic handover, you'll take the 9 prefectural envoys of the Black Serpent Guards to Lion City, Friendship City, Base City, and other peripheral cities to lay a global intelligence network. The Mountain Sea Guard would be responsible for domestic intelligence, while the Black Snake Guard would be responsible for international intelligence." This was Ouyang Shua's plan. From then on, the 2 intelligence agencies would no longer cross paths. As for the fact that the Mountain Sea Guard would not be able to effectively supervise the Black Snake Guard, Ouyang Shua was not worried. Since the establishment of the Black Snake Guard, Black Snake had proven his loyalty. Secondly, the headquarters of the Black Snake Guard would still be in Scholartree Manor in Shanghai City. Once Black Snake was done, he would have to return to Shanghai City to take command. Therefore, the Mountain Sea Guard could still supervise the Black Snake Guard to a limited extent. Ouyang Shua continued, with Lion City as the center, establish the Asian Intelligence Division, with Friendship City as the center, establish the African Intelligence Division, with Base City as the center, establish the European Intelligence Division. In the future, we will also establish the North American Intelligence Division and the South American Intelligence Division to cover the entire world. How about it, are you confident? Black Snake's shock turned to joy, his emotions fluctuating. He hurriedly calmed himself down and nodded. No problem. This time, the Black Snake Guard was not starting from scratch. As early as when the 3 major cities were taken, the Black Snake Guard had already extended its tentacles according to the Lord's request. What Black Snake needed to do was to build on this foundation and improve further. Similarly, the Mountain Sea Guard's Overseas Division will also be handed over to the Black Snake Guard. From now on, one will be responsible for internal affairs, while the other will be responsible for external affairs. They will not interfere with each other, Ouyang Shua said. Understood. Shunbuhai and Black Snake nodded in unison. Ouyang Shua said, Black Snake, you have to follow up on the Somali side. According to Gu Xiuwen, those guys are becoming more and more unfriendly towards Friendship City. Find a chance to teach them a lesson. Don't worry, my lord. I will definitely take care of this matter. Black Snake was in high spirits. Ouyang Shua nodded, and his expression suddenly became solemn as he said, What I'm going to say next is limited to the 2 of you. Don't leak it out. Shunbuhai and the Black Snake looked at each other and saw the surprise and understanding in each other's eyes. Just now, they were still wondering why Jun Shang would suddenly adjust the 2 intelligence agencies. They were afraid that it had something to do with what was going to happen next. Ouyang Shua told them about the silver hand one by one. The more they listened, the more shocked they became. The Yen-Huang alliance was already powerful enough, but who would have thought that there would be such a terrifying organization in the world? Ouyang Shua said, I'm sure all of you have realized that the Silver Hand will be the mortal enemy of Shanghai City, and also the biggest obstacle for us to expand overseas. If we don't figure out this opponent, we have no chance of winning. My lord, this official understands. Black Snake's eyes flashed with a trace of heat. He finally understood why Jun Shang was so eager to establish a global intelligence network. Even though Black Snake was a famous international mercenary leader in reality, he knew nothing about the Silver Hand. The thought of colliding with such a behemoth made the Black Serpent's blood boil. Ouyang Shua glanced at Black Snake and said, Blood can be hot, but brains can't be hot. We know almost nothing about this opponent. Since we can't even deal with the powerful academies, it's not something we can touch now. Be careful not to spy on them and fall into the enemy's trap. Black Snake calmed down. He was not a reckless person and said, Don't worry, my lord. In the first 2 to 3 months, the Black Snake Guards will focus on building the overseas intelligence network and will not take the initiative to provoke them. That's good. Ouyang Shua nodded and said, I will subsidize the Black Snake Guards another 500,000 gold coins to expand the overseas intelligence network. You will have to rely on yourselves for the next period of time. Thank you, my lord. Black Snake's expression was a little moved. Of course, he knew that the territory's funds were basically spent on the 5 million recruitment plan. Under such circumstances, it was already very rare that the lord could still squeeze out 500,000 gold coins. Ouyang Shua waved his hand. Go and prepare. He had already explained everything that needed to be said. This official will take his leave. Shun Buhai and Black Snake bade farewell and left. The next period of time would be enough for the two of them to be busy. Ouyang Shua sat alone in the study and raised his head to look at the sky outside the window. He saw a patch of dark clouds suddenly floating in the blue sky. They seemed to be swallowing the entire blue sky. A storm is coming. Ouyang Shua was most worried about the situation in the Mediterranean Sea. Although he could not guess which members of the Silver Hand were in the world, William and Henry, who were from large families in the real world, must be them. What kind of changes would happen in the Mediterranean Sea because of this incident? Ouyang Shua had no way of knowing. He had secretly made up his mind that after Shanghai City was established, he would immediately send troops to Morocco. As for the original target of attack, Annan Kingdom, he could put it aside for now. Time waits for no man. The strategic location of the base city was too important, and it was the only stop for the Mediterranean fleet. However, such a place could not achieve self-sufficiency, and it was too dangerous. Only by taking down Morocco could the Mediterranean fleet advance and retreat. Thinking of this, Ouyang Shua picked up his pen and wrote a letter to Queen Kalia of Atlantis, asking her to take care of the base city on his behalf. If there were any changes, he hoped that Atlantis could intervene and protect the base city. Although such a request was a little shameless, Ouyang Shua could only do so. As for William and Henry, Ouyang Shua was not in a hurry to send a letter to test their attitude. Before the situation became clear, the two of them would definitely not take side. Even if they did, they would not clearly stand on Shanghai City's side. The relationship between the two parties was not that solid, and Ouyang Shua did not want to humiliate himself. Only Ouyang Shua's gentle breathing could be heard in the huge study. The lively lantern festival arrived in the blink of an eye. This also meant that the spring festival cycle was coming to an end, and the auspicious and festive atmosphere that shrouded the wilderness would gradually dissipate, replaced by killing and indifference again. With the establishment of the country at hand, Shanghai City held the grandest Lantern Festival in the territory's history on the night of the Lantern Festival. The huge city that stretched as far as the eye could see was filled with colorful lanterns of various colors. Hundreds of leisure plazas in the city were lit up with huge colorful lanterns that looked like tall buildings, attracting countless citizens to come and watch. The small merchants and peddlers naturally would not let go of a business opportunity. There were people selling candied haws, sugar figurines, steamed flour cakes, clay figurines, paper cutters, shadow puppets, and so on. Acrobatic troupes and all kinds of performers also took the opportunity to walk into the plaza and began their performances. They won cheers and naturally made a lot of money. It was the Lantern Festival, and adults and children were especially generous. Moreover, it was located at the foot of the royal city, and the citizens lived a rich life, so their spending power was naturally the highest. Mixed in the crowd were not only Southeast Asian merchants, but also many Western merchants and missionaries who came from afar to enjoy the cultural feast that was unique to the ancient Eastern civilization. Some Western merchants did not forget to take the opportunity to promote the Western treasures they brought back and forth among the crowd. There were magnifying glasses that could magnify things, colorful gems, and countless other rare things. It was really lively. Some people said that many things that could not be bought in the royal city could be found in Shanghai City. The prosperity of the ocean trade and the gathering of merchants from tens of thousands of countries made Shanghai City, a new city in the wilderness, more and more extraordinary. Other than the plaza, other places were equally lively. On the excavated Friendship River, flower boats competed with each other for beauty. The trees on both sides of the river were also full of colorful lanterns, and tens of thousands of people surrounded the shore to release prayer lanterns. Some prayed for the safety and health of their loved ones, some prayed for fame, and some prayed for wealth. The Mazu Temple, the Earth Temple, the Bell and Drum Tower, and other landmark buildings were also the focus of decoration. In particular, the Mazu Temple, as well as the newly built Taoist temples and temples in the city, all kinds of temple fairs were held on the last day. The current Shanghai city was already in full bloom. All kinds of religions could take root here, and even the Western churches would not be excluded. The wilderness had not evolved to the Wei and Jin dynasties, and Buddhist culture had not spread in the wilderness. The sects in the city were still based on Taoism, and there were probably no less than 15 to 16 Taoist halls and Taoist temples. The Dragon King Temple, the God of Wealth Temple, and the Earth Temple could be seen everywhere. Of course, the most eye-catching one was the North City Tower of the Royal City. Hundreds of the most noble, most exquisite, and most original lanterns in the city were gathered here, and it was naturally the best lantern. The sky was filled with fireworks that bloomed throughout the night. Among the fireworks were sky lanterns that carried the wishes and blessings of countless people, illuminating the entire night sky. They gradually disappeared into the night sky, drifting into the endless distance. Shanghai City had completely become a city that never sleeps, and it was filled with endless prosperity and elegance. 3 years ago, who would have thought that an inconspicuous small village would develop into a giant city that was the center of the world's attention? Amidst the bustle, the first fire brigade established by the Public Order Department of Shanghai City ran through the streets and alleys of the city, putting out the fire in time to ensure the safety of the festival. The governance system of Shanghai City was becoming more and more modern. Royal City, North City Tower. Ouyang Shua brought Song Jia, Binger, and the others to sit on the city tower, eating all kinds of delicious food while enjoying the bustling night view of Shanghai City, celebrating the festival together. On both sides of Ouyang Shua sat Jiang Shang, Xiao He, and the other ministers. They all joined in the fun and began to recite poems with the lanterns as the theme. The poems were talking about the lanterns, but they were actually praising the prosperity in front of them. Ouyang Shua listened with a smile, and from time to time, he would give all kinds of rewards, but his heart was unusually calm. Who knew how many undercurrents were surging under this bustling scene? Mobile users, please browse and read for a better reading experience. Chapter 8:14. The Lantern Festival was a day of reunion and celebration, but it was also the final preparation time for all kinds of conspirators. On this night, a small white token completely stirred up the guilds in the 9 royal cities, secretly setting off a monstrous wave in an attempt to dismember the Mountain and Sea Alliance Guild alliance. Their real purpose was to take this opportunity to remove the outer barrier of Mountain and Sea City. Needless to say, this conspirator was the Silver Hand. In the China region, in addition to the original 6 members of the Handan 6 hegemons, the Silver Hand also had many secret members. These members were basically secret families, and they didn't come out easily. For example, the leader of the Star Alliance, the Dust of Star, and the hidden family behind him, were members of the Silver Hand. However, under Ouyang Shua's intervention, Stardust's appearance did not go smoothly, and he was disgraced. In the world, the China region had the deepest foundation and the longest history, so there were many secret members in the China region. Apart from the founder of the Silver Hand, no one knew the exact number of people. After the Silver Hand listed Ouyang Shuo as an extremely dangerous anomaly and activated the 15th clause, the first to take action were not the foreign members, but the secret members of the China region. Today they had reached the first stage of closing the net. After tonight, the entire structure of the guilds in the China region would change. Quanzhou, the headquarters of the Flowing Light Pavilion. In the secret room of the president, two people sat opposite each other. One was the pavilion master of the Flowing Light Pavilion, Jun Yilao, and the other was a middle-aged man with a simple face. Upon closer inspection, the middle-aged man looked somewhat similar to Jun Yilao. Xiao Jun, it's been almost 10 years since that incident. Are you still unable to let it go? The middle-aged man picked up the teacup and took a sip, looking at Jun Yilao with a slightly kind gaze. Don't look at me like that, it's disgusting. Jun Yilao's heart was obviously in a mess. It was obvious that the middle-aged man in front of him had an unusual relationship with him. You are my son, Jun Yilao said with a mocking expression, illegitimate child or bastard. When you coldly expelled me from the family, I had nothing to do with you anymore. Didn't you guys think highly of yourselves? Didn't you adhere to some **T ancestral rules and didn't step into the mortal world? What's wrong? You can't stand the loneliness anymore and want to jump out again? Earth is gone. What are we still holding on to? A trace of loneliness flashed in the middle-aged man's eyes. For the secret families, it was undoubtedly a very painful choice to leave Earth, China, and the roots that their ancestors had laid down for generations. It almost destroyed their lifelong beliefs. Some old fellows would rather die than migrate. If I go to Hope Planet, where should I be buried when I die? This was their obsession. The middle-aged man in front of him had been influenced by these values since he was young. Naturally, he had suffered the pain of being cut off. Old Jun remained silent. Xiao Jun, times have changed. A new era is coming, an era that belongs to you young people. Old fellows like us have fallen behind the times and will be slowly eliminated. The middle-aged man's words were sincere as he continued. The clan has already decided to come out of seclusion and appoint you as the successor of the clan. We will assist you in leading the Flowing Light Pavilion to establish hegemony in Quanzhou and take down the satellite city. I don't need it. I can handle it myself. Hearing this, there was a slight fluctuation in old Jun's heart, but his words were unyielding. The middle-aged man shook his head and said, You can't. Don't scare me. The middle-aged man said, I'm sure you know a thing or two about the clan's power. Quanzhou is the foundation of our clan. We've been operating it for hundreds of years. Even in the game, more than 30% of the leaders of the guilds in Quanzhou are still indirectly controlled by the clan. Xiao Jun, do you really think you can succeed in opposing the clan? Old Jun's eyes narrowed. Why? Old Jun naturally knew the clan's power, but wasn't this power not easily used? Because of this, the middle-aged man took out a small white token from his chest. The token was very ordinary, made of pure silver. It was not expensive, and there were no patterns or carvings on the surface. However, it looked a little strange. The tip of the token was like a small palm. Old Jun was shocked when he saw it. He said in horror, the silver secret token of the Silver Hand. Who are you going to deal with? He calmed down and asked with some uncertainty, could it be Shanghai City? That's right. Despicable. You actually attacked your own people. Old Jun stood up angrily. The middle-aged man said, Our own people? After the establishment of the Federation, is there still a distinction between allies and enemies? If there is no difference, then what are you still defending? To unify the world? Old Jun's face was indescribable mockery. In the end, isn't it Shanghai City that blocked your path? You make it sound so beautiful. Maybe you're right. The middle-aged man did not argue anymore. His son had grown up and was even more powerful. He could not be fooled. But how could anyone in a high position believe in nonsense like ideals? Old June did not know what to say and sat back down resentfully. The atmosphere in the secret room suddenly became a little awkward. It was still the middle-aged man who spoke. He did not want to beat around the bush anymore. He directly handed the white token to old June and said, "Do you accept this token? What if I accept it? What if I don't accept it?" The middle-aged man said, "If you accept it, you will be the heir of the clan and also the overlord of Chuanzhou. If you don't accept it, you will be the enemy of the clan. I think you know what will happen in the end." Old June was silent for a long time. Flowing Light Pavilion was his painstaking effort. It was also his last trace of pride after leaving the clan. If he did not accept the silver token, it was tantamount to becoming the enemy of Silver Hand. At the thought of that behemoth, no matter how stubborn old June was, he could not help but feel a chill in his heart. But old June was unwilling to succumb to the despotic power of the clan. As long as he thought of that rainy night 10 years ago, when he was 14 years old and left the old house deep in the mountains under the indifferent gaze of the clan, old June could not suppress a ball of anger in his heart. This flame burned for 10 years and still did not extinguish. He did not expect that after 10 years, that clan would let him return to the clan because of a white token. The way of the world was really ironic. Old June's fingernails unconsciously pierced into his flesh, causing a dull pain. Seeing this, the middle-aged man did not want to turn against his son. He tried to persuade him, "Wui and you are only in a cooperative relationship. Is it worthwhile for you to sacrifice for him? An anomaly is an anomaly after all." Old June suddenly raised his head and fixed his eyes on the middle-aged man. He said in a hoarse voice, "I accept." As he said this, he reached out to take the small token, but it was as heavy as 1,000 pounds. "That's my son." The middle-aged man smiled with relief. Old June's heart was dripping blood. Chengdu, the headquarters of the Laojun Temple. Among the headquarters of all the guilds, the Laojun Temple was the most special. The whole headquarters was a large Taoist field. There were many Taoist temples, which contrasted with the overall architectural style of Chengdu. There were many outstanding people in Sichuan, and there was also the legend of the sword immortal of Mount Shu, so the atmosphere of cultivation was very strong. It was not a coincidence that the Laojun Temple was located in Chengdu. It was night and the lights were bright. An old Taoist holding a horsetail whisk came to the front of the Laojun Temple. "Who are you?" Laojun Temple was dominated by Taoist professional players. Even the gatekeeper was dressed as a Taoist. He spoke very carefully and was not so straightforward. The old Taoist flicked his horsetail whisk, made a bow and said, "Please inform your temple master that an old friend, Xian Jizi, has come to visit." The guard saw that the old Taoist was a bit sage-like, so he did not dare to neglect and immediately entered the door to report. Not long after, a middle-aged man rushed out of the door. He was wearing a green Taoist robe and his face was ruddy. At first glance, one could tell that he was a Taoist with deep cultivation. Looking closely, one could see that the man's face was full of excitement and expectation, so he walked in a hurry all the way. It was the temple master of the Laojun Temple, Taoist priest Greenbull. Taoist priest Greenbull was also a quite legendary figure. In reality, he was a rich family of 3 generations, and his family was quite rich. It was said that once he went to the mountain to play, he met a master and had a great enlightenment, and stepped into the Taoist gate. After that, Taoist priest Greenbull cultivated in the deep mountain for 5 years before going down the mountain. After going down the mountain, he directly took a Taoist certificate and became a serious Taoist. He even built a Taoist temple on the outskirts of Chengdu with his own money and widely accepted disciples. Although he was a certified Taoist, Taoist priest Greenbull was not old-fashioned at all, and he kept up with the times. In addition to building a Taoist temple and accepting disciples, Taoist priest Green Bull was also one of the moderators of the world's most famous Taoist forum, Purple Cloud Palace. When he was free, he would post on the forum to solve doubts and spread Taoist knowledge. Because of his profound Taoist knowledge and humor, he had a large number of loyal fans. Taoist priest Green Bull's name was made at that time. As a result, even the Taoist temple he built became more and more famous. From time to time, netizens of the Purple Cloud Palace would come to see Taoist priest Green Bull. Some senior netizens could even sit and discuss Taoism with Taoist priest Green Bull, which was very comfortable. The Laojun Temple in the game was built based on the Taoist temple in reality. The core members were all disciples recruited by Taoist priest Green Bull, and the backbone members were mainly netizens of the Purple Cloud Palace. Therefore, the Laojun Temple could be regarded as a rather legendary guild among the top 10 guild. Taoist priest Green Bull rushed out of the gate and saw the old Taoist waiting outside. He could no longer suppress his excitement and said in a trembling voice, "Master, it's really you." As he said that, a trace of tears flashed in the corner of his eyes. Taoist priest Green Bull said that he had been guided by an expert in the deep mountain, and it was not a lie. If it were not for such an adventure, Taoist priest Green Bull would not have had a series of achievements later. In the following years, Taoist priest Green Bull had entered the mountain more than 10 times, hoping to see his master again, but he could not. He had always felt regretful. When the interstellar migration began, Taoist priest Green Bull thought that he would never see his master again in this life. He never thought that his master would take the initiative to visit him in this life. How could Taoist priest Green Bull not be excited? Silly boy! The old Taoist smiled gently, and his expression was also emotional. Chapter 8:15. In a quiet room at the headquarters of the Laojun Temple, Taoist priest Green Ox personally served tea. "Master is elusive, it took me a long time to find him," Xian Jizi said. "I'm used to living a carefree life, so I don't see him." Taoist priest Green Ox hesitated and asked, "Then why did Master come this time? If I can help, I will never refuse." He didn't believe that this mysterious master would come for no reason. "I was entrusted by someone, so I can't help myself," Xian Jizi said, and took out a white token. Taoist priest Green Ox was puzzled and asked, "What is this?" Although he was a rich third generation in reality, he couldn't enter the eyes of the Silver Hands, so he naturally didn't know. Xian Jizi gave a general introduction of the Silver Hands. Taoist priest Green Ox gasped and asked, "Is there really such a mysterious organization in the world? I thought it was made up." There was no lack of speculation about various mysterious organizations on the internet. Ordinary people saw it, but they just regarded it as a strange story, and no one would really believe it. Even if they believed it, there was no way to prove it. Xian Jizi nodded and said, "My sect is a member of the Silver Hands. This time, I want to ask you to accept this silver secret order on behalf of the Laojun Temple." After receiving the order, do I have to obey the command of the Silver Hands? Taoist priest Green Ox was a little hesitant. People of the Taoist sect couldn't stand such restrictions. Xian Jizi smiled and said, "It's not that exaggerated." With that, Xian Jizi told the purpose of the Silver Hands to Taoist priest Green Ox. It was nothing more than to make the Laojun Temple draw a clear line with Shanghai City and join the Yan-Huang Alliance. Xian Jizi continued, "After you receive the order, the Silver Hands will use some power in Chengdu to ensure that the Laojun Temple takes over the satellite town of Chengdu as a return." Taoist priest Green Ox was immediately moved. The profession of Taoist was not a mainstream profession in the game, and the Laojun Temple had many challengers in Chengdu, so its position was not very stable. Taoist priest Green Ox was worried about how to take over the satellite town. He didn't expect that there would be such joy. "From the looks of it, Master really is my lucky star," Taoist priest Azure Bull thought to himself. Without any hesitation, Taoist priest Green Bull took the token and said with a smile, "Since Master has come forward, of course I agree. I accept this silver secret order." Xian Jizi nodded expressionlessly. In the end, Xian Jizi's sect was not willing to get involved in the struggles of the mortal world. However, when one was in the Jianghu, one's actions were beyond one's control. Even secluded sects could not completely break away from the shackles of the mortal world. "Master, may I ask why the Silver Hand wants to deal with Shanghai City?" However, Xian Jizi couldn't say too much. Even in the introduction of the Silver Hand, he had some reservations about Taoist priest Green Ox. Who knew if this person would have a second-grade syndrome? "Perhaps he can't stand the way Shanghai City is doing things," Xian Jizi said vaguely. Taoist priest Green Ox seemed to understand, but he didn't want to understand. The relationship between the Laojun Temple and Shanghai City was established through a third party. There was no friendship between them. "I can only say that I'm sorry." Taoist priest Azure Bull didn't feel guilty at all. Luoyang, the headquarters of the Tingyu Tower. Sword Energy Thunderous stared at the man opposite her with a frosty face. "What are you doing here?" At the moment, standing opposite Sword Energy Thunderous was the gang master of the crisscrossing Sword Energy, One Sword from the West, who was also the former chivalrous partner of Sword Energy Thunderous and now his sworn enemy. One Sword from the West said, "Ian, are you still not willing to forgive me? Dream on." Sword Energy Thunderous stared angrily. One Sword from the West let out a long sigh and said, "You're still so eager to win." The right and wrong of what happened that year was already unclear. As a man, One Sword from the West didn't want to care about it. But he really liked Sword Energy Thunderous. As the gang master of the crisscrossing Sword Energy, what kind of woman couldn't he get? However, One Sword from the West was still alone. Not only the members of the crisscrossing Sword Aura, but also the members of the Listening to the Rain Tower admired their building master and tried to enlighten him. As One Sword from the West said, Sword Energy Thunderous was too eager to win. Their breakup back then had something to do with this. After they separated, Sword Energy Thunderous publicly declared that he would not give up easily if he defeated One Sword from the West. Perhaps this had already become Sword Energy Thunderous' obsession. "Do you know how dangerous Planet Hope's environment is?" One Sword from the West suddenly changed the topic. Sword Energy Thunderous pricked up his brows. In the Federation's propaganda, Planet Hope was basically heaven. However, people like Sword Energy Thunderous would not easily believe it. The Federation said so to encourage immigration and at the same time, encourage the citizens. Sword Energy Thunderous was also very curious about what kind of environment Planet Hope was. When One Sword from the West saw this, he continued, long before the interstellar immigration, the Federation had sent an advance fleet to Planet Hope. Not long ago, Planet Hope's information was transmitted to Gaia. In fact, Planet Hope is not an ideal home. There are a large number of natives living on the planet. They take a path that is completely different from Earth's technological civilization. The natives there are freakishly strong, and the more special ones even have superpowers. It's a little like the magi of ancient myths and legends. That's why combat professional players like us will have a bright future on Planet Hope. If the Federation wants to take root on Planet Hope, they need lords to open up new territory and a large number of warriors to charge and break through enemy lines. Gaia has already simulated them into a game race based on the information of the natives collected by the advance fleet. After they're done, they'll prioritize releasing them into the subterranean world that's about to open, so that we can practice in advance. Sword Energy Thunderous was shocked by this news. After a long time, he said, "I appreciate what you've told me. However, it's impossible for me to forgive you. You should leave." One Sword from the West panicked and said, "Ain, why don't you understand?" "Understand what?" A hint of fanaticism flashed across One Sword's face, and his eyes shone with ambition. He said agitatedly, "Such a planet hope is a crisis, but it's also an opportunity. Isn't it a great opportunity for us to change our fate? As long as we hold the guild firmly in our hands, when we reach planet hope, we'll be above the rest, leaders, and no longer pawns at the mercy of others. If we fight among ourselves like this, we'll be playing with our future. So, Ain, I beg you to stop. With the two of us working together, who do we have to fear in the China region?" Sword Energy Thunderous sneered and said, "A person who can't even control the capital city dares to say such big words. Aren't you afraid of biting your tongue?" One sword from the west was unconcerned and said, "You're talking about Shadow Alliance and Single Dream Brothel, right? The two of them won't be able to jump around for long. The satellite cities in the capital city will definitely belong to Crisscrossing Sword." Sword Energy Thunderous heart sank. Seeing that one sword from the west's expression did not seem to be fake, he said deliberately, "Even if you can take them down, you'll still have to rely on Yen Huang Alliance's support. You're a pawn of Yen Huang Alliance, and you still say you're not a pawn at the mercy of others? Do you think I'm a 3-year-old? One sword from the west was unconvinced and said, "What do you mean by pawn? We're working together, but we're just using each other. If not for Yen Huang Alliance, would I have been able to obtain the top-secret information I just told you? This is called taking what we need. When we get to Hope Planet, we'll all go our separate ways. Who can control who?" Sword Energy Thunderous said, "If that's the case, isn't it better to choose to work with Shanghai City? At the very least, Wui isn't like Di Chen and the others who eat people up without spitting out the bones. Don't tell me you don't know about the state of Yunnan City? Also, Shadow Alliance and Single Dream Brothel also have Shanghai City behind them. Even with Yen Huang Alliance's help, are you so confident that you can take down the satellite cities in the capital city? Right now, Yen Huang Alliance has been beaten so badly by Shanghai City that they can't even stand up straight. Don't be so happy after being dumped." One sword from the west smiled and said, "That's why I came to find you today. I'd like to hear what you have to say." Sword Energy Thunderous interest was completely piqued. It seemed like one sword from the west had come prepared today. One sword from the west smiled mysteriously and said, "You don't know, right? I'm afraid Shanghai City won't be able to jump around for long." "Are you all right? You're getting more and more ridiculous." Sword Energy Thunderous frowned. One sword from the west lowered his voice and said, "Ain, I'll tell you the truth. Yen Huang Alliance indeed doesn't have the confidence to deal with Shanghai City. But behind Yen Huang Alliance, there's a mysterious organization. That organization's terror will scare you to death. This time, Shanghai City has incurred the wrath of the public. Some people can't stand it and want to deal with Wui. Isn't working with Shanghai City at this time akin to courting death? Mysterious organization? Is it a lie made up by Di Chun and the others to trick you?" One sword from the west shook his head and said, "I'm not stupid. I can't tell you the specifics right now. Unless you swear that even if you don't agree to my suggestion, you won't tell Wui what I told you today. I'm putting my life on the line this time. Ain, you don't want to hurt me, right?" Sword Energy Thunderous saw this and felt touched. He said, "All right, I swear." Saying this, he swore an oath. One sword from the west saw this and his expression was complicated. There was joy and reminiscence. The oath made by Sword Energy Thunderous was a unique oath that only the two of them knew. It was a memory that they shared. At least she hasn't forgotten the past. One sword from the west thought to himself. One sword from the west collected his emotions and slowly took out a small white token. He told Sword Energy Thunderous all the information about Silver Hand. Sword Energy Thunderous' expression was exactly the same as Taoist priest Green Bull's. One sword from the west could understand Sword Energy Thunderous. He was the same back then. He smiled and said, "Ain, do you believe me now? There's no tomorrow for you to follow Shanghai City." Chapter 8:16. Sword Chi Thunderous Sound's emotions were complicated, and it was hard for him to make a decision. Unlike the Flowing Light Pavilion and the Laojun Temple, the Tingyu Pavilion was an official member of the League of Mountains and Seas Guild Alliance, and Thunder Sword Energy himself was quite familiar with the members of the Alliance. Between the members of the Alliance, there was no longer just a simple conflict of interest. There was also friendship. It was too much to ask her to betray the alliance of mountains and seas. Seeing this, one sword from the west said, "Ah-in, I know you are in a difficult situation. But if he didn't accept the Silver Secret Order, the Rain-Listening Tower might not even be able to take down the satellite city of Luoyang with the terrifying means of the Silver Hand. Losing the satellite city was equivalent to losing their position as the overlord of the royal city. Do you understand the consequences? Is the Hand of Silver really that terrifying?" Thunder Sword Energy asked. One sword from the west casually mentioned the names of the leaders of 4 or 5 large guilds in Luoyang and said, "Standing behind these guys are all hidden aristocratic families, which are members of the Silver Hand. Apart from those who were directly controlled, there were even more who were indirectly controlled by the hidden aristocratic families. Even Di Chun and the others didn't know. Tell me, are they scary?" Thunderous Sword Energy's throat was a little dry. The leaders of these guilds that Yi Jianxi mentioned previously all vowed to cooperate with the Tingyu Tower. Once they collectively betrayed him, the consequences would be unimaginable. When he thought about it this way, he really did not have much confidence. The key was that no one knew how many guilds the Hand of Silver could control if it was fully activated. The unknown was the scariest. Seeing this, one sword from the west decided to add fuel to the fire. He advised, "Cooperating with the Silver Hand is not forcing you to turn against Shanghai City. The Tingyu Tower has just chosen a new partner. If you feel bad about it, you can just avoid a head-on conflict with Shanghai City." On this point, the Silver Hand did not insist. "I think that they can also understand your difficulties." This was giving him a way out. Thunder Sword Chi's expression was complicated. He asked reluctantly, "Do I have to accept the order? I can't not answer it. Think about Planet Hope. Weren't we compromising today so that we wouldn't be manipulated by others in the future?" "Ain, don't ruin your own future," one sword from the west said. Thunder of Sword Chi closed his eyes in pain and said bitterly, "I'll take it." "Great." One sword from the west was so excited that he wanted to step forward and hug the Sword Chi Thunderous Sound. But when he was right in front of it, he came to his senses and awkwardly froze his hand in the air. Seeing this, Sword Chi lay inside inwardly. The moment he received the order, Thunder Sword suddenly felt uneasy. It was as if he had made a terrible decision that day. Unfortunately, there's no turning back now. Thunderous Sword Chi's mood was complicated. After one sword to the west left, Thunder Sword Chi wrote a final letter to Ouyang Shua. The content of the letter was very short. There was only one sentence: "Sorry, please be careful." In the end, Thunder Sword Chi thought about it and added the names of the leaders of the other guilds to the end of the letter. She believed that Ouyang Shua was able to understand what she meant. "This is all I can do." Thunderclap Sword's heart ached. Dali, Ministry of Justice. More than 200 constables gathered in the courtyard, which was incompatible with the festive atmosphere of the Lantern Festival. On the steps, an assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice read the arrest warrant. After investigation, the pavilion master of the Breeze Pavilion, Bright Moon Illuminates the River, is the blood brother of the Kunming County Chief of the Southern Border Protectorate, Bai Hua. The two of them have a close relationship and are suspected of colluding with the enemy. Now the Bright Moon Illuminates the River is to be taken to the prison of the Ministry of Justice for interrogation and to find out the truth. "Yes, sir." Under the command, the constables rushed out of the Ministry of Justice under the leadership of the constables. Passers-by on the road saw them, and all got out of the way. When the constables were far away, they came out again and pointed at them. It's a big festival. Who committed a crime and even alarmed the constables directly under the Ministry of Justice? Who knows? In less than half an hour, a group of constables arrived at the headquarters of the Breeze Pavilion. The guards of the Breeze Pavilion were also puzzled when they saw a group of constables from the imperial court. The constables did not stand on ceremony. They showed the arrest warrant and immediately led the constables into the courtyard of the headquarters. The guards did not dare to stop them. They only arranged for someone to rush to inform the pavilion master. A large guild was naturally not afraid of the 200 constables in front of them. However, they could not deny that they were from the imperial court. They had the backing of 1,000,000 imperial guards, so they had no choice but to be afraid. At this stage, even a great lord like Ouyang Shua did not dare to go against the capital, much less a guild of players that made a living in the capital. Of course, under normal circumstances, the imperial court would not find trouble with a guild of players. Gaia had strict restrictions on this, especially in a capital city like Dali that had yet to be ruled by an emperor. The imperial court was like an invisible person that would not appear in front of the players. It was clearly different this time. There was an expert operating behind the scenes, wantonly spreading rumors about bright moon illuminating river and white birch. The Ministry of Justice had sufficient reason, so it was reasonable for them to send constables. Furthermore, the arrest warrant stated very clearly that they were only temporarily holding bright moon illuminating river. After the truth was investigated, if bright moon illuminating river was innocent, they would immediately be released. The crux of the matter was that the contest for the satellite city would begin tomorrow. If they took down bright moon illuminating river at this time, the Breeze Pavilion would immediately be without a leader. His sinister intentions were clear as day. Therefore, when bright moon illuminating river received the news, they immediately thought of the contest for the satellite city tomorrow. It was too much of a coincidence. Many times, excessive coincidences are not coincidences, but conspiracies. Bright moon illuminating river knew this, but he did not dare to take the opportunity to escape. Once he resisted arrest, the imperial court would have sufficient reason to seal up the Breeze Pavilion. When that happened, it would be an even greater disaster. The mastermind was truly vicious. He had been hiding all this while, only taking action on the night of the Lantern Festival. He had caught bright moon illuminating river off guard, and had no time to prepare. Pavilion Master, what should we do now? While the constables were still at the door, the upper echelons of the guild urgently discussed countermeasures. Bright moon illuminating river had already calmed down. He said, "No matter what, we cannot be disorderly, nor can we have a conflict with the constables. Otherwise we will fall into their trap. Cool Breeze, restrain the gang members. Do not let your emotions affect your decisions." As the second in command of the Breeze Pavilion, Cool Breeze had a lot of prestige. Understood. Cool Breeze turned and left. Another deputy pavilion master of the Breeze Pavilion, Night Rain, asked, "What about tomorrow's contest for the satellite city?" Bright moon illuminating river said, "Follow the original plan. When I'm not here, you and Cool Breeze will command. I think the enemy has more than this ruthless move. I'm afraid there will be more waves in tomorrow's contest. You have to be careful." Night Rain nodded with a solemn expression. "Also, after I leave, immediately send a letter to White Birch and tell her everything that happened today. I suspect that this matter is not simple. I'm afraid that the mastermind has a big plan." Bright moon illuminating river said. Night Rain was shocked when he heard this. He hesitated and asked, "Pavilion Master, do you mean that their real purpose this time is to deal with Shanghai City? It can't be?" "It's hard to say." Bright moon illuminating river did not dare to draw a conclusion. "Anyway, it's always good to be careful." Although Bright moon illuminating river did not say it with certainty, his intuition told him that behind this conspiracy, there was a high chance that Shanghai City was the target. Because if it was just to prevent the Breeze Pavilion from taking over the satellite city of the Dali Kingdom, his opponents did not have the power to influence the Dali Imperial Court and ask the Ministry of Justice to take action. Knight Rain nodded with a solemn expression. At this moment, there was a noise and a shout from the small courtyard at the door. The constables had arrived. "That's it. I'll leave tomorrow's matter to you." Bright Moon Illuminating River was a straightforward man. He did not hesitate and took the initiative to walk out of the room. Before Sword Rain followed him out, he heard a shout from the small courtyard. "I am Bright Moon Illuminating River." Sword Rain shook his head. His big brother was still the same, honest and straightforward. In the small courtyard, at this moment, hundreds of players of the Breeze Pavilion had gathered, and the courtyard was full of people. Seeing that the pavilion master had been arrested, everyone looked angry, and their eyes looked murderous. If Cool Breeze had not been maintaining order, these constables would not have been able to walk out of the small courtyard. Seeing this, even the constable's feet trembled a little. Before coming, this constables did not expect to encounter such a big scene. "Take him away." The constables did not dare to stay for long. After taking the man, they immediately prepared to leave. If they stayed any longer, he was afraid that his constables would wet their pants. These dissimulated men were really cruel, like wolves and tigers. Waves of murderous intent pervaded the courtyard, making people feel cold. It was no wonder that gathered in the small courtyard were all the elite members of the Breeze Pavilion. Which one of them did not kill people like flies? At this moment, the originally clear night sky suddenly began to drizzle. Bright Moon Illuminating River stood in the rain and looked around at the brothers present. Unexpectedly, he grinned and said loudly, "Brothers, don't panic. I'm just going to the Ministry of Justice for some tea, and I'll be back soon. Tomorrow's battle, when I'm not here, you can't be lazy. Open your eyes and kill all the enemies of the Breeze Pavilion." After a pause, Bright Moon Illuminating River suddenly shouted, "Brothers, tell me, can you do it?" Yes. Hundreds of people shouted in unison, and the momentum was great. "Haha, good." Bright Moon Illuminating River laughed heartily, turned to the constables and said, "Your Honor, let's go." He suddenly took the initiative and became the host. Seeing this, the constables did not dare to refuse. A group of people shuttled through the curtain of rain and soon disappeared on the street. The members of the Breeze Pavilion silently watched the back of the pavilion master go away, and they shared a common enemy. In the curtain of rain, Cool Breeze was the first to withdraw his gaze. He turned his head and said, "Everyone, have an early rest. There will be a big battle tomorrow. Don't let the pavilion master down." Everyone nodded in silence and gradually dispersed. Only Cool Breeze and Sword Rain stood in the corridor, looking at each other in silence. They both saw the worry in each other's eyes. "There's something fishy about this Rain." You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.